which is being presented tonight.
Anytime you're ready.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, it is, I guess this is one of the few powers that the mayor can do without anybody else signing off on. So it is my pleasure to appoint trustee Arlene Burgos as the deputy mayor. Only out of self-interest. I hope it's not a taxing job because it means I'm not here or not available. All right, next up is the presentation of the 2023 independent audit by PKF O'Connor Davies.
Great.
Probably if you want to go there to the
Yes.
mic, then anybody who's online can pick it up.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Okay, great. I have a PowerPoint
Okay.
presentation.
We'll get that shared in a second.
Just wait for it to get up. Perfect, thank you so much. So my name is Melissa Zott. I'm the engagement partner for the Village of Irvington, and we did the audit as of May 31st, 2024. Could we go to the next slide? So tonight I'm going to be talking some required communications, sort of an overview of the audit. We have some higher level of your general fund revenues and expenditures. We'll dive a little bit deeper to see how exactly you got to your results. We have provided a 5-year general fund balance history for you. The village does operate other funds, so we'll go over that. And then we have provided a debt service schedule of your bonds. Next slide. So management and those charged with governance. Those charged with governance would be the Board of Trustees. It has certain responsibilities as part of this external audit process, making sure that there's appropriate accounting policies, not only selecting it, but making sure that those are implemented appropriately. The financial statements, which you should have received the document, is prepared in accordance with the United States generally accepted accounting principles. Making sure that there's proper internal controls. As you know, controls are always important in every organization. So making sure that you first and foremost establish those controls and then do a periodic review to ensure that they're maintained appropriately. Compliance with all of your laws and regulations, as well as any contracts that the village enters into. Providing us as your external auditors all of the financial records and any other information that we request. And I just want to give a big thanks to Katie Bugna, the clerk treasurer, as well as her entire department for your cooperation, so thank you. And probably the most important is setting a proper tone at the top, making sure that there's high ethics at the village. So not only does the management and those charged with governance have certain responsibilities, us as your external auditors also have certain responsibilities. The deliverables that you have, first and foremost, is your independent auditor's report. That would be the financial statements. We have issued an unmodified opinion. That's also referred to as the clean opinion. It is the best opinion the village could receive. We have also issued a yellow book report. That's the report on controls and compliance. We have issued a report on compliance of each major federal program. So when you do receive federal monies, reimbursement for projects, we have audited FEMA this year. Required communications to those with governance, as well as the management letter, are housed in one document, and that would just have any best practices that we've identified. We are required to communicate any fraud or illegal acts that were noted during the audit. We're happy to report that there were none. We did not encounter any significant difficulties. There were no uncorrected misstatements and no disagreements with management. As far as the timeline, we were out here doing the preliminary audit on June 14th. The preliminary audit consists of the control portion of the audit, making sure the controls are operating effectively. And then the field work, we were here the week of July 22nd. That's where we dive deeper into the balances that we've reported in the financial statements. Next slide. So this is a 4-column schedule. it presents the results of the general fund of the village. Your first column is going to be your original budget. That was a budget that was adopted.
Before you go,
Please.
I just want to make sure, you might be familiar with fund accounting because of schools. Are you familiar with fund accounting at all? It's okay if you're not. You are, okay, all right. Otherwise, I was going to ask for a brief primer. If you want it, we can do it, but.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So fund accounting is more of a short term. It's based on a 1-year lookout. Anything long-term like capital assets or your long-term debt, like your general obligation bonds, those would be reported on a separate set of financials called the government-wide financial statements, which are also housed in here. And what we do is we reconcile your fund level financial statements, rolling it forward to your government-wide financial statements to show that we're adding on your capital assets, we're adding on your bonds payable. But generally, your general fund would just be your 1-year operation budget. You're welcome. So the first column here is going to be your original budget. Like I said, that was adopted. Your final budget, if you have any budget transfers or budget amendments during the year, that would be included in that column. Your third column is your actual results as of May 31st, 2024. And then we have a variance. So the variance is going to be between your actual results and your final budget. So again, this is high level. On the next couple of slides, we'll go in detail. So your first row is your revenues. You can see you adopted the budget with about a $20.4 million of revenues coming in. That ended up increasing. So you did have some budget amendments during the year for about 21.5 million is what you anticipated final. You actually received 24.3 million. So you did, last column, 2.8 million better than budget. Your expenditures would be your money is going out. So you adopted the budget with about 18.7 million expenditures. You did have increased that to 19.7. You actually only spent about 18.7. So again, variance column, you did have a budgetary savings of about $1 million. Third line, your other financing sources and uses, that would be any transfers between other funds that you operate. So that came in approximate to budget. And then let's look at the third line from the bottom, net change in fund balance. You can see that the net change in fund balance is a negative number. So in your original budget, you anticipated using fund balance. So general fund balance of $533,000. Of that amount, $226,000 was included in your adopted budget. So you should be familiar with that number. Adding to that $226,000 are purchase orders that have not yet been completed to date. So that gets rolled into your original budget. If you look at your final budget column, same line, you can see that that increased to $1.1 million. So from 533 to 1.1. So that means that you now anticipated using even more of the general fund balance. A majority of that increase was related to transferring $400,000 to the water fund to help eliminate that deficit, $75,000 to the sewer fund for the same purpose, and then also transferring an additional $207,000 to your capital projects fund. Third column on your actual. So you have 2.75 million as a positive. So not only did you not use 1.1 million, you actually added to fund balance of 2.7 million. So last column, your variance with your final budget, that 3.9 million, that would be your budgetary surplus that you had as of May 31st, 2024. So your fund balance beginning, you started at 8.9 million. You ended at 11.7 million. Not all of that is free and clear to spend. We'll go over that on a couple of slides, but let's talk about how you ended up with that budgetary surplus. We'll go to the next slide. So the revenue line that we identified in the previous slide has different components to it. So what we did was we broke out the components here. Your first line is your property tax. So that's your tax collections and your tax levy that you do collect You did see that you did come over budget about 83,000. So your variance is going to be your fourth column. We did provide a prior year column as well. But looking at your 83,000 over budget, your collections were better than in previous years. So you're going to collect more than what's anticipated.
That's as a percentage, or we may have picked up somebody who hadn't paid in a prior year?
Potentially could have picked up somebody paid in the prior year. There's an accounting mechanism where we're only allowed to recognize revenue up to 60 days after fiscal year end, then it gets deferred until later. So it could represent some of that. Your other tax items, the next line, that came in at about 145,000. Your other tax items include your pilot payments, your payment in lieu of taxes, as well as your interest and penalties on taxes. Most of the savings was related to your interest and penalties on taxes, so you did actually collect more interest than anticipated. Your third line is your non-property tax distribution from the county. Easy enough to call that sales tax. That's the sales tax that the village receives. So you did anticipate 1.6 million. You actually received almost 1.8 million. So about 169,000 better than anticipated. This fluctuates depending on the economy, how many people are spending and going out and buying in the county. We've also seen a continued slight increase in the county as well through today. Your other non-property taxes is your next line. That would include your franchise fees, hotel tax, and utilities gross receipts tax. That came in relatively consistent within budget, about 41,000 over. Your departmental income is your next line. Your departmental income would include any departmental related revenues. So you did come in about 79,000 over budget, relatively consistent. Most of that was within your police fees. Your police fees ended up doing 103,000 better related to your Con Edison work that you do get reimbursement for. Next is your rentals. Your rental income came in about 163,000. You did budget 282,000, so that did come under. There was a new GASB in the past couple of years related to lease standards. You do have a cell tower lease, so you're leasing that, you're getting rental income for that. It does end up sitting on the balance sheet. You are collecting all of the revenue. It's just an accounting mechanism that's a little bit different. A big surplus on the next line is your earnings on investment. You did 519,000 better than what you anticipated, so what you budgeted coming in. You did have about 7.8 million in NICLAS, which was earning about 5.2% throughout the year. And then you do have a CD, which is earning about 5%. Next is your permit fees. You could see your permit fees did much better. You had 946,000 in revenue, so 430,000 better than anticipated. Most of these permit fees were related to building permits. There were a large number of home improvements that happened during the year, as well as construction projects. Your ambulance service awards, that would be to your length of service award program, essentially is not budgeted. It's not part of the general fund budget that gets adopted, so we put it as a separate line item here. I'll jump down next to the federal aid. I think that's a good place to start. Your federal aid, you can see, came in at about 1.4 million. It's 1.2 million better than budgeted. A lot of that was related to your FEMA, so that's the federal program that we did audit. And your two largest projects related to the reimbursement was your Station Road Playground as well as your Dow's Lane. So that's a majority of how we got to the 2.8 million better on the revenue side. So let's talk about the expenditure side next. So on the expenditure side, same number of columns. We'll start at the general government support. General government support includes any administrative and management services necessary to operate the entire village as a whole. So you did have savings of about 221,000 in that variance column there. 100,000 was related to contingency line item. You do have a line item called contingency in your budget, and that's just to help provide funding for any unexpected events. There were about 66,000 of savings as well on your refunds of real property tax. So that's what makes up a majority of that 221,000. Your public safety line item, those activities aimed at protecting your life and property. So that's like police, fire, emergency operations are included in that line. You can see that you did have about 200,000 savings in that line as well. Most of your savings is in the police function, which is about 112,000. That was savings was mainly equipment and supplies related. Your transportation is your next line. You have about 235,000 of savings in transportation. Of the 235,000, half of that was about your snow removal. We did have a mild winter, so you would anticipate savings for that. And then the other half was related to your street administrative, so administrative fees related to transportation. The next three lines are relatively consistent with your budget. So we'll jump down to your employee benefits, about 207,000.
I'm sorry, what's economic opportunity and development?
Sure, so that's really going to be focusing on initiatives related to promoting economic growth, programs for the aging. So those are the two. I think it's like a publicity for the village as well as programs for aging in those lines. So your employee benefit line, 207,000 in savings. 100,000 was related to your medical and dental insurance. And then you had about 60,000 in your state retirement savings, so related to premiums. You do have some interest, some debt service interest that runs through the general fund. That's primarily for your bond anticipation note interest. And then your other financing uses of about 2.9 million this year. That's all transferred to other funds. So you're transferring money to your capital projects fund to fund current projects, your debt service fund to fund principal and interest payments. You do transfer $1 million to your library fund to fund the library, as well as your water and sewer. We'll go to the next slide. So this is your general fund balance. What we've done here is provided a 5-year history. I think it really helps to see where the village has come from through today. Like we talked about on the very first summary slide of the numbers, we looked at your total fund balance. So third line from the bottom, 11.69 million. We talked about how that's not really all able to be spent. There's certain restrictions associated with this. So we can see that you have 4 different buckets here. Your first bucket is non-spendable. So that's already earmarked to be spent in the future. So you have your prepaid expenditures of about 537,000. Mostly related to your health insurance for your June payment, as well as your workers' comp for 24-25 premium. So your total non-spendable. Your restricted would be legally restricted. Like we talked about, you do have a service award program, which is not currently in your general fund budget, but it is included as far as the accounting purposes in your general fund as a whole. So 932,000 is entirely restricted to be spent on that. Your assignment would be internally assigned. So you have purchases on order of 221,000. So that essentially is your purchase orders that we talked about have not been fully fulfilled to date. So what's nice about the purchases on order is that will roll into next year's original budget. So it allows you some savings on that part. And then 288,000 was included in your 24-25 budget. So when you went through that budget adoption process, you should have seen that 288,000 in the general fund to balance the budget. So that leaves your unassigned free and clear to be spent on village purposes at about 9.7 million. I do like to show you this percentage at the very bottom. It's your unassigned, so that 9.7 million over next year's budget. So that 22.2 million. So you're at about 43.7%. GFOA, which is the Governing Finance Officers Association, has come out and stated that you should have approximately, at a minimum, 2 months of operating expense, which would be about 16%. So you guys are at 43.7. You can see you started out in 2020 at about 30.7. So you did increase over the year. I think what's important to note here is that 16% is a minimum. Depending on what the village needs, if there's significant renovations, if you're thinking about issuing debt in the future, you could essentially use some of this unassigned fund balance to help offset any debt that you might have to issue in the future. Okay, so let's go to the next slide.
That, by the way, was the theory behind the bond proposal,
Oh.
which didn't get unfortunately conveyed to the public. Not that I'm suggesting that the bond proposal as framed was necessarily something people wanted to approve, but I don't think people understood that a substantial number of the borrowings being proposed would have been covered by fund balance. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
Yes, good point, good point. On this slide, the village does operate other funds. I think we talked about it briefly. So we'll talk with your capital projects fund first. So your fund balance, you can see, is a deficit fund balance. It is an accounting deficit fund balance. So you start off at a 58,000 deficit. You had some revenues, some transfers, as well as some expenditures. So it ended at about 3.3 million in a deficit. I did like to put your bond anticipation notes payable. So you do have 7.7 million of your bands outstanding as of May 31st. It is at a 4.5% interest rate. The way that the governmental accounting works is you're not allowed to recognize that as revenue yet to help offset that deficit. So I like to compare those two numbers to show that it's not a real deficit, it's just an account, the way that we have to account for it.
In other words, we have the money that we have borrowed and we have the indebtedness. So it theoretically is a wash, maybe more than theoretically, it's a wash, just
Yes.
not the way you present it.
Correct, exactly.
Is the money borrowed in the surplus of 11.7 million?
Let me look, hold on a second. So as of May 31st, and we'll do have a slide on the debt, but as of May 31st, you have about 11,045,000
Okay.
outstanding.
And the thing to keep in mind before you subtract one number from the other is that band gets rolled into borrowing that based on the useful life of the things for which we borrowed, so it may not get paid for 20 years. If you want to worry about something, look at retiree medical. Look at the footnotes on that, which, actually, that's a question, I suppose. If you are working with other communities, I assume most communities are currently funding because there's no other requirement. They fund the expenses of the given year and knowing that there is an overriding obligation for retirees off out in the future.
Correct, yeah. So as part of the financial statements in the long-term debt section, there's that net pension liability, which is, substantial. It's several $1 million. But it is based on an actuarial assumption. They look at mortality rates, they look
Sure.
at contribution rates, but you are only expected to fund a current portion.
Understood.
Yeah. So your water fund is for the records activity for your water utility operations. So you did start out with 249,000. You had revenues, which would be your charges to the constituents, about 2.6 million. Your other financing sources and uses net, about 110,000. Like we talked about, you did have a transfer in from the general fund, about 400,000, but that was offset by a transfer out to your debt service fund because the water fund does pay a portion of that debt. So you ended the year at 354,000 in fund balance. Your debt service fund helps pay for debt service, your principal and interest payments that you have. You did end at about $1,088,000. What's nice about that is you can help utilize that for future debt service payments as well to help offset the costs. Then your non-major governmental funds, included in there is going to be your library, your sewer fund, and your special purpose fund. So combined together, you start at 768,000 and you ended at about 926,000 of fund balance. So here's the bonds that we talked about. So what we've done here for you is listed out the summary of the debt outstanding by issuance. So you have an issuance of 2009, about 225,000 remaining. 2014 was issued, you have about 2.6 in that, and 2019 was about 8 million. So total 11,045,000. And then what we have below on the schedule is your payments to maturity. So you can see how much you'll have to pay in both principal and interest for the years upcoming, which I think is very beneficial for budgeting purposes and planning for future debt as well. So that's what I have as far as the numbers are concerned. If there's any, my presentation today, so if there's any questions, I can take those.
Since I got a preview of this and you have incorporated my comments already, I'm gonna limit my comments to what you described in the separate booklet. I think you had a different title for this, but it was the control deficiencies.
Sure.
There were two, project deficits, I think it's special purpose funds. Usually those are just negotiated resolutions and they're not material, they're not, and you put this in the book, they're not material weaknesses. So, and is it premature to ask how we would propose to resolve them if you haven't already done it? It's page, by the way, 11 and 12, this is because that's the separate book. Sorry, I don't.
Oh, for the capital projects?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's okay, yeah, you guys, I got these books as a souvenir, so you may not have the same.
Some of them we borrow, some of them we
oh,
transfer.
right, okay, so the first one, the firehouse architectural design. The funding for that project was originally included, to be borrowed as part of the 18.2 million bond referendum. So since that didn't pass, the remaining deficit was addressed in our 2024 capital budget. The Matheson Park renovations, that amount gets offset by the 193,600 in outstanding bans. And then the remaining was addressed in the 2024 capital budget with a transfer in from the general fund. The EV charging station, that project's complete. The funds will be transferred in and then that project can be closed out. Senior Center Energy Management, that gets offset by the 402,000 in outstanding bans. And then the remaining balance was addressed as part of the 2024 capital budget with a transfer in from the general fund. The theater AC, as of fiscal year end, there was 375,000 in outstanding bans and 500,000 in outstanding grant reimbursements. An additional 750,000 was provided for as part of the 2024 capital budget, which was 320,000 in borrowed funds plus 430,000 in fund balance. Harriman Road culvert, that project is covered by a $1.1 million New York State DEC grant. The EV charging station project is covered by the Westchester County rebates. The Downingwood Broadway culvert design is covered by Bridge New York grant reimbursements, and that's all of them.
That's impressive.
Luckily, I have my
Just happen
notes
to have
on
them
that.
there, okay. I would have taken, I'll get it for you later. And the other stuff that I see in the special purpose fund under the head, actually, it's under special purpose funds, is relatively minor. It's $25,000. Tree planting and Main Street benches and things of that sort. And would, the things that you've just described presumably will come to us to the extent there's gotta be adjustments as adjustments that we need to approve?
The, for the capital projects, those are all already in place. So that's already,
Even if there's for example, you mentioned, I don't know, let's take theater, 375 in bans and 500 in grants, is slightly less than the deficit fund balance. Would you have a transfer then from the general fund to cover any of the difference? Or is there
it
something?
would be whatever the board, decides, but any of the, 2024 capital budget items that I mentioned were already approved as
Oh, no,
either part of
I'm not
the
arguing
bond.
that point.
Oh, okay.
I'm with you. I'm not trying to undo something we approved, maybe it's just more of an accounting question, that at some point you reconcile that there's a difference and you're gonna
Oh,
ask
yeah,
us to
so
make up the
any,
difference.
additional deficits beyond these, would have to be discussed,
Okay.
with the board, and then a decision would be
Okay.
made.
Got it, thank you very much. That's it for me, I don't know if anybody else has anything. Good? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so
Appreciate it.
much. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thanks, Melissa.
I don't think anybody's wished me to have a great rest of the meeting, so I'll take it. It's usually quite the opposite. Okay. Next up is checks over $25,000. I think there's about 4 of them. That's for Ford Lincoln, Hempstead Ford Lincoln Mercury for a pickup truck, $57,787. For the water department utility body truck, I guess, 2024 F-350. Capital Fund, $97,915.92. For the Scenic Hudson Parks Court Improvement Park, Capital Fund, it's $69,040.58. For theater HVAC, general contracting, $162,598.36. And for the water main breaks, I find it hard to believe this is the whole number. There's gotta be something else coming in, but it's $31,571.88.
That's just this bill, and then there were other,
Got it.
there's
Okay.
overtime and other
Understood.
contractors, yeah.
Understood. Okay, all right, let me switch to correspondence. There are sort of two groups here, and I'm gonna shift the order of those that are listed just to put the no fishing together with the, actually, I'm gonna do the no fishing second, because I understand you might have something to present, which we can then roll into public comment, so you can just come up and present it. So let's do the housing piece first, if I can find it. Usually it tells me the page, but I found, no, I'm kidding, I found it. Okay.
I didn't do my job.
So we got a letter from the Housing Committee, and they, let's see if I can find my summary here. Basically pointing out they've devoted significant efforts to expand the rental stock and affordable housing with the village. They're offering to help the village act on the pro-housing community pledge that we made, and offering to meet with me and their trustee liaison, Arlene Burgos. And it's not in your letter, but I'm hoping that what comes up later in the meeting is a precursor to some opportunities for housing. And that is the Facilities Planning Committee work, because if it's not inherent in projects that we might do, it may create space that would permit it. And I'm sure, David, you're going to talk about that anyway, perhaps, when we get to that point. So I think you guys, the ball was in your court to kind of pick a date that we can get together for the housing piece of it. So we'll take, whatever we can, whatever works for us, and we're happy to meet. So, thank you. Oh, and related to that, I received a letter today from Todd Smith, who is our general foreman. Many of you, if you were without water, probably saw him out there working in the recent past. But he happened to mention that he and the crew had been discussing housing response time and emergencies, and asked if there had been any discussions on workforce housing. All we hear about is affordable housing facilities. He can only speak for DPW, but we only have a handful of employees that currently live in Irvington, Terrytown area, and our younger employees are currently living in, parents' homes, so he's worried about staffing the department and response times in emergencies. He also offered to talk to anybody who wants to talk about this, so, you might want to, preferably not when he's in the middle of solving some emergency, but there may be an appropriate time to just understand, or maybe coordinate it through our, village administrator, but clearly it's an issue at every level of the village in terms of making sure we have local affordable housing. Okay. Let me switch, if I can scroll back up here. So, the issue is, and this comes up in 1, 2, 3, 4, and probably more letters, because I think I'm gonna get a few here. The issue is discontinuing fishing at Halsey Pond Park. And the first letter is from Lisa Antonelli, and she asked that fishing be discontinued and provided a lot of evidence of problems, and a number of people confronted one particular instance where a blue heron that frequents that pond was entangled in a fishing line, and probably it looks like there's things attached to the fishing line from the photographs that I can see. And also was kind enough to kind of point out things that could be done to implement a change of that nature. The second letter on this subject was from Todd Wilson, who's in support of Lisa Antonelli's proposal to no longer permit fishing at Halsey Pond. And he's, sort of seen the resulting unhappy interactions with those fishing and walking, and the trash that gets left there. And Charlotte Binns also said she's writing in support of the newly formed and growing Halsey Pond Friends Group. And it's sort of as she pointed out, it's a first step in the series of ecological stewardship strategies that the group hopes to deploy in partnership with the Parks Department. And then there was another letter. Shital Akarekar, forgive me if I mispronounce that name, but also writing in support of the proposal to ban fishing at Halsey Pond. They live next to the pond and walk around it several times a week. And even after the village installed the plastic tubes for fishermen to dispose of their line, the problem continues. And as somebody, personally, I live near the pond, so I see the same evidence around the pond. And I think there's another letter that we're gonna put on a future meeting, but while we're at it, I will point out that Lisa again writes to lend her voice in support of the petition to ban fishing at Halsey Pond. She doesn't come to the idea of a ban lightly, especially an activity that I know provides a healthy family pastime for some members in our community. She was moved to this position by the injured and entangled heron, and points out that Halsey Pond is suffering as its water level drops, and basically points out some of the same problems that the other folks have pointed out. So why don't we, before I make some suggestions, switch to public comment? If you want to give more than one, I'll take more than one, but
Tricia, I just wanna make sure that we're all on the same page, that we know what we're dealing with here. So I have all of this, and then I found more. So I have this whole box. Just so you know how sort of gnarly these things are. There's plenty to go around, of course. And these are the little ones.
actually what you're really going to want to do is show it that way wherever the camera is, because they're the ones, the folks at home.
The camera's directly behind you,
Yeah,
That one up there.
yep.
not in the back.
Okay, so there's a lot. Well, there's this whole board, and then there's this box, and
I will stipulate that there's a ton of stuff because I see it hanging in trees myself, so you don't have to.
there's some there now.
So tell me about the petition though.
Oh, okay, so here is a copy I brought for you. I've made some edits to it based on comments I got from some of the people they wanted to sign, but they didn't want to, I made edits like in the beginning.
Yeah, I got it. So that's the list of
This
signatures
is
then?
the list of signatures, Yeah.
what I'll do is probably, I mean, people are welcome to look at it, but
In the
we should
end,
give it to Larry to
111,
scan it.
yeah. There might be a couple more, some people signed both husband and wife on the same line.
It's all right, you,
Oh,
what you can do, actually, is this complete with the signatures? Or with the list of names?
the names is, with the purple headers.
Got it. You know what, here, let me have the name, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Let's just give this set to Larry.
How many names were there? 111, maybe a couple more, I didn't want to. Right.
Because that's probably, that's probably the most relevant factor. So let me, only just that there's wide public support, I'm not arguing,
Here's why public support.
yeah, and I'm not arguing that there isn't an impact on the flora and fauna, and I'm not arguing that it doesn't occur.
Okay.
And so, you know, you had me at hello, but there is a necessity of looking at both sides of the issue. Now, before I even get to that point, are there other people who want to speak on the, I shouldn't, if you're not finished, why don't you finish if you wanted to say something? Okay,
I don't want to waste time.
okay, well then, if there's other, oops, this one, sorry.
Oh, there is a formal letter from the Friends group, which is part of the.
Fine,
pages that went
that's
around.
what, and that list of names are the people who have signed that, is that the idea?
That's and beyond. That's and beyond, yeah, the Friends group.
Well, what I'm asking is, you're giving us a letter from the Friends group.
Which was shared to everybody in the Friends group, and they edited it and
Commented on it
And that's separate from the petition.
exactly.
Okay,
That's what you're asking, right?
yes, that is what I was asking. Got it. Okay, do you wanna say something?
Do I need to come up?
Yeah, just
For the people
because there's
on-
people at home.
It's not, it's
We
not-
hope.
Okay,
Also for the recording, if people come back.
That's
and watch the
true.
meeting.
Do I have, state my name and all that?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Zoe Hamilton von Bauer. Hello, everyone. I signed the petition. I'm also part of the Forming Friends group. I've done a little bit of research and about the sort of other side because I understand that Halsey has a long-standing history of fishing and being a fishing spot for the community. And I think that from my perspective, the issue is really management and enforcement because there's a sign at the entrance of Halsey, with rules about fishing. I'm pretty sure it's not being followed and there's no one managing it. And my understanding is the police used to have some sort of, organize some sort of activity at the pond and there was education about how to fish and be responsible. And as far as I'm aware, that's no longer occurring. So I just think that we have to have, whatever policy continues, has to be something that can be managed and not put in the hands of the community to enforce. I think it's whatever, for whatever reason, fishing has really
It's not working.
bloomed at the pond and I don't know what exactly people are there to fish. I know that there are a few different fish, but as Lisa showed you, there are some pretty significant hooks that are, would really cause injury to someone or an animal. And anyway, it's just, we have to figure out how to make a balance. Thank you.
Can I ask you, you just said how to make a balance, I think, is there an education, and I'm gonna just say I don't really go to Holsby Pond, so I don't know too much about, so I'm speaking just from listening to you all speak, but is there sort of like a public education intermediate sort of step before you ban fishing? Because I did hear from, I guess, from Boy Scouts, that like the Boy Scouts go and fish there, and have been for a long time, so is
Right.
there sort of like an interim educational kind of step that can be taken before an all-out ban?
I think there could be, it's just who would take that on.
Funny you should say that, since you're the rec liaison. One of the two things I was gonna ask is that you check in with RPAC
Yeah.
and just see, okay, why is it structured the way it is, and what, if anything, if they know, if they have an answer to this, because it seems to me that we should hear how they came to the position they're at, and then certainly, our
You mean the
reps.
woods or the our
RPAC.
Okay,
I mean, Woods can participate, but I think it's
Yeah.
RPAC in
Well,
that
why-
instance that,
why would it be our path?
because I think that's who set this up.
Oh,
Woods
but-
is the Irvington
Yeah.
Woods primarily.
Right,
They're
Halsey's
that's why they're
separate.
setting up
It's a
Halsey.
part.
But there's
Yeah.
now a Friends of Halsey Pond.
Right.
Yeah, we're just organizing. I don't know, there's a sign at the entrance of the pond that says you need a license. It's only Irvington residents, and that there's fishing from April 1st through October 31st, and those rules are not being followed.
Yeah, so it's
And-
worth.
But I don't know if it's RPAC. I don't know between the police department or RPAC, sort of who was managing the program.
Okay. So maybe
Um,
a little bit of looking into it and sort of conversations among different groups to kind of, okay.
But it's certainly worth, if you don't mind, just
Yeah.
check in.
No, I would check with our
Yeah.
path, yeah.
And just see what their thinking is, because I'm pretty confident, just from the rumor mill, that they do have an opinion and some thoughts on this particular issue. The other thing I would like to do, just so we can understand if a change is being made, Larry, can you find out if this is a regulatory issue, or it's, in other words, is there a law that applies to this, or is this just a rule that was established by the rec department in terms of governing the Halsey Pond? And I don't know if there were, when the pond was deeded to the village, if there were any sort of restrictions in terms of how the pond is to be used, which might also be relevant.
I do think there are restrictions on how the
Okay. But some of them might imply, recreational activities like, I hope it's not there, but like fishing or like something else. And we should know that before we take some sort of action on this. So thankfully, this is not in the fishing season at the moment. So if somebody sees somebody fishing, I don't think there's any harm in calling the police and saying, if you're not dealing with some real emergency, could you just,
Actually, they said that fishing is allowed year-round,
even though the sign is posted otherwise?
so I don't know.
Okay, it's,
And then somebody put tape over that part of a couple of the signs.
got it. It might-
The question
They
is
like
what the
trying-
rules are and where they originate from.
Yeah, I.
Is there a village
yeah,
code?
yeah.
I doubt there is,
And maybe
right?
if you do, if in the process, maybe you could just ask the chief if that is, I'm not suggesting it's not reality, but if that is the position,
On the
police
DEC website, there's standards about what fish can be fished when, and there are certain fish that can be fished year-round. I'm
Oh, maybe
really
you're-
not aware of-
Maybe it's the license that you're
Yeah.
referring to, that as opposed to what our local rules are governing access to the pond.
Right, and that was sort of one of my questions about the sign, is maybe, even though maybe it's possible for fishing to be year-round for certain types of fish that are in the pond, the village put up a sign saying that there was limited fishing months. I don't know the history at all, but this is,
Because the question is, someone could put up a sign, it doesn't mean it's, enforceable. We have to know, is that sign there because there was because there was an administrative decision to make that a rule from whatever entity, and you can think of several that might have come from? Is it from the code, which again, I doubt it is, but if it is, obviously that's something we have to know. Just it being on the sign alone doesn't tell us anything.
right,
Yeah, it's just a sign.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's again, so it's a management, like who's responsible and what are the rules and what are,
Got it.
what, but it should be
So
figured out
clearly, there's a lot
to
of
figure out.
support for not having fishing. Now let's find out why we have fishing to begin with, and certainly the folks, I won't say certainly, but I suspect folks on RPAC have understand the history behind some of this. And if they don't, could probably, at least let us know that, and we'll try to find out.
We have
Could we also-
Rick here, do you know the history?
My understanding is that the rules are county rules, fishing, county, you need a county permit to fish anywhere in the county, and that includes the Hudson. And those dates, under my understanding, is April to October.
Got
So
it.
that is
So
enforceable.
there should be no
Okay.
other fishing going on, I don't care what the police say.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be
Okay.
good to ask Frank, what was he basing, when he says that it's all year round, is he basing that on a specific, like, what's the basis for that decision that he mentioned, so that we can find out, because that works two ways. We can learn from what he's drawing from for that rule, and we can also educate him
Yeah.
if there's no basis for that, so.
And then the interim thing too is education, because you can have, as we know from many things, you can have many rules that are not enforced or properly enforced, and that really doesn't change anything. So even if fishing isn't a problem because it's not properly managed, doesn't mean fishing is necessarily bad, right? If it's not being managed, that could be a problem, and maybe saying you just ban it because it's not being managed is not the right answer. Maybe the right answer is it needs to be managed. Yeah.
Just come to the mic if you can.
Just go to the mic, please.
My name is Lisa Antonelli. I and many others do not want fishing at Halsey Pond Park. Fishing is having a detrimental effect on other visitors' use of the park due to the dangerous metal hooks and fishing line left by fishers. Fishing can be enjoyed at the Hudson River, where there are fewer trees, fewer children, fewer pets, less wildlife, and more parking. And there is precedent for eliminating an activity at Halsey Pond. Other activities that are not allowed at Halsey Pond for safety reasons include ice skating and biking. Discontinuing fishing at Halsey Pond in favor of the Hudson River is a sensible and elegant solution that gives Halsey Pond the same dignity as parks like our majestic Matheson Park, where fishing has never been allowed. The Recreation and Parks Department has tried several times to mitigate the amount of discarded hooks and line at Halsey Pond. But sadly, these strong efforts have failed. Under Joe Archino's leadership, trash receptacles were put at the pond, but somehow they landed in the water. I was told someone threw them into the water, but we have no proof. Mr. Archino also tried signs directing people to take their trash out with them, which also did not work. More recently, Ms. DePaoli tried installing receptacles planted in the ground with signage specifically for fishing line and hooks, but still no change. The problem is that there is no good way to manage and monitor fishing at Halsey Pond. The pond is simply too remote of a location with too many trees, too many children, too many pets, and too much wildlife for the police or the Recreation and Parks Department to manage and monitor. And so for the past 10 years, this has been especially bad, and the individuals fishing have left a trail of hooks, line, sinkers, and death. Trees are slowly being killed as more and more of their branches are cut to remove fishing line. I watched a turtle suffer at the hands of a fisherman who tried to pull a hook out of the turtle's cheek with pliers. You can watch a young man on YouTube killing fish at Halsey Pond as he uses them for bait. Others just don't throw fish back in time. Fishers are killing birds that get caught in their discarded fishing line or swallow the discarded hooks. And fishers at Halsey are hurting children and pets that get tangled in their fishing line and hooks, like my daughter when she was caught, or my dogs. I do understand and appreciate the calming effect and other benefits of fishing, so I would like to suggest that the Recreation and Parks Department promote fishing as a recreational sport at a location with fewer trees, fewer children, fewer pets, and less wildlife. The Hudson River seems much better suited for this sport, and it has more parking. To foster a deeper appreciation and respect for nature, I would also like this board to direct the Irvington Recreation and Parks Department to promote alternative activities at the park. Bird watching, also a calming activity, encourages observation of diverse bird species and fosters a greater understanding and appreciation of wildlife. If you've never seen or tried the Merlin Bird app from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, I can all but guarantee that you will be delighted the first time you use it to identify birds by their song. It's amazing, this app. Sparrows, blue jays, cardinals, black-capped chickadees, red-winged blackbirds, and even those pesky woodpeckers can all be seen at Halsey Pond. You will also find in those docks a great bald eagle that I spotted just earlier this year. The app costs nothing and takes up no room in your closet. Nature hikes obviously provide an opportunity to explore and learn about local plants, animals, and ecosystems, promoting physical health and environmental awareness. I've always thought a self-guided plant identification tour would be a great addition to the Halsey Pond.
Forgive me, normally you'd be limited to 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
I'd let you run way over, so just try to summarize
Okay.
if you can.
If you're truly interested and passionate about connecting with nature, join the Friends of Halsey Pond group. irvingtongreen.org/land. And yeah, I'm not alone. I submit 111 signatures, and our community and visitors of our beautiful Halsey Pond, thank you. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Can I ask a question, actually? Just, when you say fishing on the Hudson, you mean where?
I see people fishing all the time.
No, I'm just asking you where, so not Matheson, you mean on we can't tell people to go, it's private property, you mean the,
Scenic Hudson, or I see people
can they fish in Scenic Hudson? No.
Yes, there's one small area,
Right, okay.
but it's a very small area and it's not conducive to fishing because there's a 10-foot drop. So if you try to really fish in, you're gonna lose it.
Well,
And
maybe.
you can't fish in that at all.
But I'm just trying to get a sense of like what we're considering, right? Like if we're saying Hudson, we can't really send people to the private lot on the Hud, right? That's a private lot. Understood, but that's private lot, so we can't say as a village, hey, by the way, go on the private lot and fish. So when we're talking about alternatives,
Why not
I'm just being
Matheson?
practical, Lisa. I'm just trying to be practical about when you say we can like have people fish on the Hudson, like that's perfectly fine. We just have to define what that means, right? We can't say go fish in the private parking lot. Like as a village, we can't say that.
Okay, well, right now you're saying go fish on this path where there's like if
I'm
you've
not
never
saying
been
that.
there or seen it, well, that's
not
what,
she's
That's
saying.
not what
What
I'm
she's
saying.
saying
but
is-
that's what the village is saying now,
No, no.
because they allow fishing at Halsey
No,
Pond.
villages
So
are-
right now,
okay.
they're standing there, if you can picture it, I'm
You get it.
standing
Wait,
here
wait, touch-
fishing,
hold on,
and
hold on,
people are
hold on,
walking
Lisa.
right here.
Lisa, no one's talking
Hold
about
on,
that.
No, it's
hold
not
on,
about that.
you're missing the point.
Yeah.
She's saying that if you want us to propose an alternative, we need to properly define it.
I'm just trying to define
We can't
it.
send someone to either private property or a place that's unsafe. We'll have to look at that and figure it out. That's all that she was
Yeah,
suggesting.
because I
Okay,
don't, you
well
don't wanna
then-
say, Lisa, just one
You don't
second.
have to have a solution.
Yes, but
Then
all-
don't have a solution.
No,
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 no.
you don't now have to
No, I'm saying
come
then
up with a-
don't offer an alternative location,
Okay. Okay,
unless you can think of one. I don't have one.
I understand.
I don't-
What I'm suggesting to you is at this exact moment, we are not going to come up with an alternate solution. We need a few moments, post-meeting, on another day, to think about it and try to come up with it, because we might actually do that. You just have to give us a chance, and instead of giving us the opportunity, you're arguing as if we're telling you no, and we're
Yeah.
not.
And all I'm trying to do is identify, right? Like, I think when we talk about alternative solutions, we have to be very clear, like, because if I'm somebody that fishes, which I'm definitely not, just to be clear,
Another thing.
absolutely not interested, yeah. If I say to someone, you know, okay, go to that parking lot, right, the village, like, they're gonna say to me, well, I'm not allowed, or I'm not allowed here, I'm not allowed there, so if we're gonna offer alternatives, they have to be viable alternatives.
Okay, I
That's
just-
the conversation, that's it.
I don't want to get hung up on trying to find an alternative for them.
We understand, we
We
don't have to
understand that you
make it a
don't-
condition
Yeah.
to deciding on this particular issue. But there are other things that need to be looked at and other people that need to be talked to. And in the meanwhile, I'm pretty sure we can do more than one thing at a time. Some people might accuse us of not being able to do that, but we'll try our best to not only look for an alternative, but to talk to RPAC and to find out what regulatory changes, if any, need to be made.
And more important procedure.
Which is advancing the process that you requested. I very much appreciate that you did what I had asked you some time ago, which is, hey, prove to me that there's a lot of people that are interested in this issue, and you did it.
I would like to say that I didn't know anything about this issue. I've been there occasionally, but you did a great job of like really explaining what the issue is. Like I have a really deeper sense. I was like, is it once or twice
Yeah.
that it happens? And clearly it's like an epidemic of it. So the problem is really well established. So I think at this point we just have to talk
Yeah.
through what's the next steps.
And
honestly,
procedurally-
giving another alternative might
And proc-
help alleviate this being an
There's
issue,
that.
right?
He's
Right,
on
that's
the
what
well.
I thought,
Right.
but I don't want it to
Right.
And
So
it
thank you.
holds it up and makes
No,
it-
but procedurally, we can't do anything tonight, it's not on the agenda for tonight, right? So first we have to figure out where the rulemaking comes from, so we know what it is we're supposed to be doing. Are we talking to the Parks and Rec Department, are we changing the village code? We don't even know what we're doing at this point. And second of all, once that's decided, then it has to go on the agenda so that people have a chance to come and comment on it. So even if we wanted to do something right now, we procedurally are not allowed to do anything about it right now.
And I wanna add one other thing, I'm sorry, the part about enforcement is important. I don't think to say we have rules and too bad, so sad, people are disregarding the rules, it's the same thing with the leaf blowers, right? I don't think you would want us to say like, oh well, like people are not respecting that, you know, there's a part of this that is change of behavior and enforcement and education that is important. That you know, it's not just saying, oh well, we can't possibly, you know, educate people about changing behavior. I would hope that we can, in many instances, educate people about changes.
I don't think it's an issue, I don't think that is an issue of education.
Okay.
I think it's an issue of when you're fishing, the line is really hard to see. Like my daughter, when she was tangled up in it, she was standing there, like not moving, and I'm like,
We
Come
get
on,
it,
let's
but
go.
Li-
And she,
Lisa,
you can't see
if
it.
I had the power right here and right now to dictate an outcome, you wouldn't like that. Because if I had that power, I'd do all the things that I like and screw everybody else. So give us an opportunity to be thoughtful. It is not fishing season, as I understand it, and if somebody confirms that to me, we're gonna go to the police and say, hey, could you make sure they're not fishing? That would buy us a little bit of time so that we could come back to this issue. I get that you're passionate about the issue, I appreciate it. Like I said, I live near the pond, but I'm not gonna let that drive me to make a mistake so that I can't enforce the rule, or that the rule is not even properly adopted. Let me educate myself. You have partially educated me by showing me that there's a lot of people interested and share your sentiment. Well, I am, but in this instance, you have to give us the opportunity to do the background work. That's just how things happen, particularly in a democracy. If you want me to dictate rules, I can do it, but I'll bet there's a lot of people in this room who wouldn't like that very much. We want to talk to the other people who might have different
Right now, we
thoughts.
don't
on
even know where the rules come from.
That's my
Correct,
point.
that, yeah, I agree.
Who made the rule, where the rules come from.
I get it.
No,
No.
thank you.
I'm not a fisherman, so it's not gonna
Me
help.
neither.
I think my
Thank
record on this is pretty clear that I'm not a fisherman.
Yes. And I really meant that I appreciate that you did what I asked, which was, show me the support, it's there, we get it. Rick, you wanted,
I just wanted to ask that the materials that were sent out to all the board of trustees members, that a copy of that comes
Sure.
back so we can investigate
no problem,
before we have another meeting about it.
not a problem.
Thank you.
Chet wants to talk.
Hi, Chet Kerr. Just in terms of where these rules come from, Halsey Pond was dedicated to the village in 1981 by Marvera.
That I knew.
That did not have restricted covenants in it. In 1991, they did a corrective deed that had the restricted covenants that dictates what, from a deed point of view, the village can do. And in there, that references fishing, not mandating it,
Yeah.
but limiting
As a
certain
permissible,
things. So
you
it's a
think permissible
1991.
use As opposed to a mandatory.
Yeah, it's not mandatory at all.
Okay.
In the current ordinances, section 153.11.8 provides fishing in designated areas only. I don't know how things get designated or not, but those are the places where you guys should look to determine the history of all this stuff. Okay, thanks.
Lisa, you should have let him go first. Okay, well, that narrows it down a little bit with the section included. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all this information.
All right, consent agenda. I have no comments on this, so I will make a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I do have I'm sorry.
Ah.
I'm sorry, just a quick
You're
question.
entitled.
The appointments are part of the consent agenda, right? Those are, we're not doing that separately.
Not the further
Not the-
resolved, sorry. Okay, let's figure this out, make sure we're doing this right. I got
Wait,
page
10, number 10.
12.
Hold on, I have a question on 10.
Yes,
No.
it runs to
No.
page.
No, it does not, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, no problem, yeah, I know what you
Yeah.
were going to. It is a long set of minutes, but it does end, I'm trying to find the ending page.
Yeah,
Appointments of 3 part-time
Yeah,
employees.
yeah, no, I got it,
Right.
I'm following, I'm learning
Yes.
from this,
Not
I'm
volunteers.
following the numbers,
No problem.
the number designation.
at the
I
risk
have
of
a
sounding
question.
like a jerk, I figured this out at the beginning of the meeting when I was going
Yeah,
back. So I was on the page, that's why I wasn't on the page before when you asked what page it was.
No problem.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, I'm good, I'm
Okay.
good on the consent agenda.
Now, next up is modification membership for the Rec and Parks Advisory Committee. I'm gonna do something that's a bit of a switch, which will probably make everybody unhappy, but bear with me, give me about 4 minutes to explain what I would like to do.
4 minutes?
Yes, 4 minutes, you can start
Just
timing.
kidding, I'm just kidding.
On this particular issue, which relates to appointments to, and this is sort of a combination of items 9 and 10, because in the volunteer committee appointments are certain people to become members of RPAC, and we were proposing increasing RPAC to 11 members. This is one of those issues where I felt like the mayor is the lightning rod for complaints from both RPAC, DEI, and some of the trustees. Not that they're not legitimate complaints, but it is complaints that I am not necessarily in a position to resolve to make people happy. And generally, the mayor makes appointments and the board itself approves them. And what I try to do is speak to the candidates, get their background, the reason for their interest, and pass that on to the relevant chair so that person can make a judgment about whether or not the person's compatible. And by that, I mean, I can't appoint people to committees who won't get along, because then I'm gonna lose other committee members. And this job's hard enough without having to chase down more committee members to replace the ones who've been chased off. So generally, there's a scarcity of people to be appointed, and that makes the job pretty easy, because here's a warm body, and there's a committee that has an open space, fantastic, there's a match. When there's more applicants than openings, I prefer to defer to the committee. That isn't always necessarily the right outcome, but I'm no better at judging who is the best candidate when there's a bunch of candidates than the chairperson. And then the board gets to either express their opinion in the process or in their vote, because they can vote it down. So in the recent round, we had about 8 people who were interested in what were 2 openings for RPAC. And I think from what I could discern, RPAC was looking for somebody who will work cooperatively, who's interested, who can volunteer their time, and in particular, was a parent with children. Why? Because I think the current RPAC members, a lot of them had kids, and they've, their kids have grown up, and they don't have that same perspective, and I think that was important. The DEI, on the other hand, had not only expressed those same concerns, but wanted to have sort of an additional aspect of diversity. And when 2 people were recommended by RPAC, there was a concern expressed by the DEI committee that they would have liked to have known a deeper basis for the decision than what I just described. And I'm not really in a position to do that. Everybody who I spoke to, and I've had to speak to everybody individually, which has taken a lot of time, all had good thoughts and good intentions. But I can't bring those 2 groups together. I can only come up with a judgment that it's Solomonic in the sense that no one will like it. Splitting the baby is not a first choice. So what I'd like to do with this particular item is take it off the agenda for it to be returned in probably January or February, to ask, if not insist, that DEI and RPAC meet. And I hate to do this to you, but you happen to be a liaison to both groups, like you.
Yeah, it's fine.
If you could coordinate that. I can't go to the meeting because I have another trustee who's a member, and that would create a public meeting. so it's gotta be DEI and, it could be representatives of the committees, but I really want them to hear each other's viewpoints. Because when I listen to everybody, none of them sound unreasonable. They just happen to have a limitation on the number of people who can be appointed. And I think it would help, I wouldn't be surprised if at that meeting you could come up with some sort of a proposal that made everybody happy. I'm not guaranteeing it, but I at least ask that that conversation happen. The other thing to note here is that the board itself probably created this problem. And by that I mean, in probably a 6 to 8 month period, there will be 4 openings on RPAC, which means everybody who's being proposed tonight, without increasing the numbers, could have gotten on. But we, as a board, chose to put somebody on who had been waiting a long time, but was not, I'm sure she will be a great candidate and probably already is a great member of RPAC, but didn't meet the requirement for young parent with children. And we just got impatient, and I don't think it was the wrong thing to do, but we acted, and that's one opening. There were 2 more that are currently pending, and there is another one that's coming, which I will leave to RPAC to discuss if they so choose. So we could have done this without a lot of the drama, but we, as is often our way, decided to do this the hard way, and I take at least partial responsibility for having done that. I guess I will close with apologizing to the 4 candidates who are listed in our minutes for putting this off for, I hope will only be another month. And I will look forward to hearing what I hope will be a recommendation as to kind of how to resolve this collectively.
I obviously have some stuff to say.
Yes, you
Okay.
can. Let me
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
with my last point is, what I'm asking for now is the one thing that I really would have liked to have happened long before this. Because I think it could have been very helpful on all sides. And I'd like to say to the DEI committee, because in addition to commenting on this particular item, I was sent a letter that had some other requests, which I'm happy to respond to and go to a DEI meeting if
But they were
somebody.
gonna come, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
I think it would, this,
I
I think that in our correspondence with them, the committee is all listening, so I'm sure they're gonna weigh in,
That's great.
right? I think they would have come to talk about it.
Well, I just didn't think that, this is
Yeah.
the last time I will interrupt you.
yeah.
I just didn't think this was the meeting to do that. I would like you and RPAC and DEI to have a private conversation, so, because some of the things that people will want to say are probably not appropriate for a public meeting.
But I actually think it's really important to talk about, so I think in general, it's really important that we sort of have these overarching things that we care about as a village. Sustainability, being inclusive and, welcoming committee, and being financially, fiscally responsible. I think those things sort of like should permeate everything that we do. I think that when it comes to DEI, it has to be, we have gone through great, sort of like thoughtfully, went from a police force that was like 25 white people, 4 white guys, 1 white woman, to diversifying our police force. DPW has diversified sort of their, and by the way, I just want to say about the police, the idea always was that the police could not be diversified because of the rule of 3 and the civil servant, which hasn't changed, and we've managed to diversify. So that you should question why that wasn't the case,
It
right?
did help that New York City opened up
It
and
did
allowed
not,
for
it,
transfers.
we, that was only, that's really the last,
Oh, all
it
right,
didn't really
good.
affect,
Well, I'm glad.
the last
So-
person was a white male.
But
Alright.
that proves your point that,
Right.
that focus
But
and attention to that aspect is
correct,
important.
but we have done that across the board, and I think that it shouldn't, part of what happened when we had the meeting with you, when the DI committee had the meeting with you, it was like, what is the most helpful thing for people to do, which is join other committees so that we can educate and have conversations and people can bring up these issues. So I feel that it shouldn't really be an issue with RPAC. The committee is 9 people, right, 11 people. It's, the Parks and Rec is like a huge part of our budget and a huge part of what we do and what's front facing in the village. So I don't know of any other committee really where that is an issue. I think like Green Policy Task Force, right? Like people want to join the Green Policy Task Force, are you rejecting them? Probably not.
That's an ad hoc committee.
It
can have
is, but
unlimited
it
members,
doesn't,
so
but
it's
like,
not that.
you're talking about 9 people, 11 people, so.
Well, that's why I want you to
But
talk
let
to
me,
them.
okay, I understand, but I just feel that it shouldn't be an issue, and I think, when we were talking before, I think, Kent, you said you didn't even think you could join RPAC. I think a lot of people sort of feel like there's this, you can't, and it's a closed committee. I don't think that I don't want that as a board member. So I don't think it's an issue of them speaking, but I do think it's important. Again, RPAC is an all-white committee. Like, you do want diversity. You want, like, some, you want, different, like, people with children, right? You want people who might live in the village, people who live, in Main Street, people who don't. You want a lot of
Ecological expertise.
correct ecological expertise. Like, I think there's a lot of diversity. Like, there's a lot of diversity that would be very helpful, right? It shouldn't be looked at as something harmful or difficult. It should actually be something that's very welcomed. So I would hope that it would be welcomed, and it shouldn't be. So I'm happy to facilitate a conversation with RPAC and DEI. I just think it's important for people to understand, we can't say we're a welcoming and inclusive community and then not be welcoming and inclusive in all of our spaces. Like, that's really critical for us.
Well, I don't think I disagree with anything you just said, but that is precisely why I don't want to be dictating the outcome for either group. I think they should speak
But
and
what if-
convey their understanding, just as you did.
I understand that.
You and I agree on that particular
Yeah.
point. So the question is, you should hear what they have to say, and they should hear what you have to say.
I think that is perfectly fine, but I do think even if they're like, we like these 2 people more because they have kids. By the way, the other people also had kids, but it's 2 more people that add a perspective that is not currently on that committee.
I didn't
So
say
it should be
we
welcomed.
shouldn't do it.
No,
I
no, I
said,
understand. I'm
have
just
the
saying it should be
conversation,
welcomed.
let's not force it down people's throats.
I'm not
And
forcing
then-
anything down people's
No, no.
throats. I'm not. I know, but
I know
John,
I would be.
No, but it's not that you would be. It's not just what you would be doing. I think it is sometimes you have to like walk the walk and talk, not talk the talk and walk the walk. Like, if we want to be welcoming and inclusive, we have to be welcoming and inclusive in multiple spaces. And that means that we convey, like, to our PAC, hey, we want you to be welcoming and inclusive of some additional people and perspectives that may have not been on our PAC for a while. And this is important. And unless it's like, I hate those people, why
What
wouldn't they
makes
be
you
like,
think-
we're
What
fine?
makes you think I haven't had those conversations with everybody involved?
Okay, but, so, I guess maybe what you're saying is that there is that they don't want those people then, maybe.
I'm not gonna make
Okay.
a conclusion. I'm gonna ask you
Yeah,
to
I mean,
arrange
this is
for
just
them
a
to
different
speak.
conversation than we have than we had before, so it's totally fine.
It is,
Happy
that is
to-
true, I did say.
Right, this is a
I was-
departure, right?
Yes.
So I think, so this is the first, I think I'm hearing this, anybody
It's
else?
first that everybody on this board is
So
doing
I'm
it.
happy to facilitate a conversation, but I think it's important that, again, just like I feel like, when we talk about sustainability, we can't just say we want to be a sustainable community. That has to permeate things around our village, how we build, how we, plant, and all these other things. And same thing with inclusion, and the same thing with fiscal responsibility, right? I think that's gonna be our next big thing. Like, sometimes you have to look at what you've been doing for a long time, and you have to say, time to reevaluate, time to say, like, maybe that we're doing an okay job, and maybe we could do a better job, which is all very healthy.
Yeah, I agree, and just to reiterate the point I made at the outset, I said I would take what we have on the table now and defer it. I didn't say I would get rid of it. That's pretty easy to do, it's all drafted and all prepared. What will happen is, presumably you'll have a conversation. You may come back and say, nobody agreed on anything, and then I'll have to make a judgment that says, put it back on the table. But I don't think that's gonna happen. I think if people speak to each other, they will learn something. Maybe they will learn that somebody's intransigent, maybe they will learn that somebody's gonna be flexible. But I think it is worth having the conversation, because if nothing else, it's an opportunity for people to educate each other. And that is important if you wanna make change.
Okay, my only issue is that I heard nothing in the exchanges that really talked about people, what the issues were. So I'm happy to hear and people to articulate that in a real way. That none of that was clear. So from everything I heard, read, and observed, I don't really even know what
I had
our
a lot of
issue
phone
is.
conversations
I'm-
too.
yeah,
So,
but-
and I
okay,
would
but
prefer
that's-
not to be characterizing them here. I'd like people to be able
Okay.
to speak for themselves. I don't think that's an unreasonable request for me not to be the arbiter of everyone's
Understood,
position.
understood, happy to talk to people.
And you folks, anybody else who wants to speak is certainly welcome. So, good, it's up to you.
I'm unclear as to, so is this, I'm not necessarily objecting to conversations that will be set up, and I'm always in favor of dialogue, but I'm unclear as to, from the beginning, my understanding is that the DEI committee wanted a clear understanding of what the interview process was and how people were selected.
That's, yeah.
Is it intended to elucidate that process?
Yes, this is the opportunity for you to ask, how did you make this judgment? And why did you pick those particular people? And why not some others? And here's what we think is important in terms of promoting diversity. And anything else you want to put on the table that is appropriate to this conversation. Because it is my hope that instead of dictating an outcome, and it may well be that the outcome that we come to is exactly what's already in the minutes, now in the proposed resolutions, but it gives people the chance to come up with a solution. As I pointed out, if we hadn't pushed forward one person, you might have had all four of them with available spots.
Right, well, I think there was also some question as to why there was limited availability on this particular committee. And that is not based on whether it's ad hoc or standing.
No, but it is something I think they would like to address, so you should ask that question.
Well, I wonder why it can't be addressed transparently in public forum.
You want to do that right now?
It's a question that I have as to why there's limited.
Because there's one person from RPAC here that I know of, and one or two people, maybe more, three people from TEI. Okay, that's entirely up to Rick. That just seems inappropriate to me. You get to have a private conversation, you get to report back anything you like from that conversation. All I'm saying is, I don't want to be in the middle of it. It's just not right. I have heard everybody's position, you have not, you have not.
No, I wouldn't
You
have
have
liked
not, and that is what I am asking to happen. And I think it's entirely appropriate for everybody involved to get in a room and have that conversation, instead of expecting me to interpret what you have to say and then convey it to folks who disagree with it.
Well, what I would have liked, John, I mean, honestly, I feel like all we needed was an email before today to say, hey, can you meet with the RPAC? That would have been fine. I think following the conversation we had, it would have been fine to say, like, we had some subsequent conversations and can you talk to RPAC? That would have been okay.
That's fine. I will give you, that's fair. There's no question that I'm springing this on you at the last minute. I'm not gonna argue that point. But I do think, especially since I'm telling you that if nothing gets done, we can put it right back on the table again. So what you're really looking at is a month's delay and an opportunity to bring the people together who have had disagreements and perhaps persuade the folks in RPAC, or they may persuade you of some of the things that they have put forward, that here's a different way to go at it.
Yeah, that's fine. I will say one thing. I think that this to me should be so non-controversial that is surprising to me. I think when we wanted to talk about diversifying the police force, it wasn't like, it was like, yes, like we had to work at it, right? We had to sort of identify, how do you identify people who want to come forward? There is not an overwhelming number of people of color in this community that are like, wanting to put themselves in this position. And then people kind of step forward and put themselves in this position. And it's like a big deal to get on a committee. That's like a lot. Like, I think it feels very heavy. And I think, the other issue is, look, when we filled the first position in RPAC since you were here, it was really a first come. Beth came, she got put on. There was no drama. Beth came, she got put on the committee, it was first come, first serve. Then Kay was waiting, she wanted to be on the committee. It was really, from my perspective, an issue of this process is so long, and that is not the process at all that's consistent with any other committee. So I feel like there needs to be parity in committees, and we should be welcoming and inclusive of our residents that want to join committees, because, you know, those of us that volunteer, and I see the same faces all the time, it's exhausting, right? Like, it's so nice to get like people involved, and it shouldn't be such a drama for people to get involved, because, you know, you get into this and, you know, all of a sudden this is like your whole second life, and you're
Well,
like, do
isn't
I have
that
a
what-
job? Do I have a job? I have a job that I have to go to.
Isn't that what, this is a part
Right?
of that. You've got 8 people who applied. And there's a number that didn't get on. So there should be some sort of understanding as to what the basis of the decision was. And that is, to your point, what you were asking for. And you can inquire of that.
Yes, but,
Might-
okay, yes,
might jump in.
and, we also are trying to diversify committees, right? Yes, and we're trying to walk the walk, you know?
Yeah.
Which is that we're trying to diversify, so I think it is
I didn't say we
okay.
shouldn't.
I know you
Yeah.
didn't say that, I'm talking for everyone, you know, who just
Can I-
doesn't hear all of our conversations.
Can I jump in just?
Yes, jump
Yeah.
in.
I'm not in either group, just, I think, just this whole process and this whole conversation we've been going on for a bit, here and just before this, it just speaks a little bit to me like the lack of standardization of how this whole process works for all of the committees. And maybe, I think there needs to be some sort of clarity about what that should actually look like for everyone. Because it feels like because one does it this way, another one does it this way, some of them because they can't get enough people, some because they have too many. But like, there really does need to be like a system for how we're doing this. Because like, it seems sort of arbitrary when we having this conversation, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't apply to any other situation, which seems crazy.
Which is what we, without digressing too much, because we recognize that, the ad hoc committees can always take more members, so it's not as big an issue with those that have, to use planning board or something like that, where it really is a
Interesting. No, I
limited
know
number.
there's a difference between
Uh,
Well, let's say the same kind of committees could have the
Yeah,
same kind of
yeah,
process.
I got it. Generally, what we decided as a board was, we put the word out publicly, we'd wait 60 days, see who shows up, and then try to make a decision. Now, we can have a debate over, should we be asking the people on the committees whether they want a particular person, or if you have multiple people, should they get to give an opinion or not? And let me just close with one more thing. If you folks really don't like what I'm doing, you have the power without me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, or actually our village attorney, to make a motion right now to do that, and I'll just abstain. If you wanna do, they cannot, it's on the agenda,
They can increase the size of the committee, which is the first
yeah,
item,
It's a mayoral appointment.
but the appointment has to come from you.
oh. All right, well, it's your call, you wanna increase the committee, you can increase the committee. But I do think having that conversation would be an appropriate thing first, I don't think it's an unreasonable request.
I don't have any objection to having a conversation. I'm all about conversations. I can talk until people don't want to listen to me clearly. I would have appreciated that when we had this conversation a while ago, like just to say, hey, like, let's have a like,
It
or
was
they
a
wanna
recent,
have a
to be fair, it
conversation.
was
Yeah.
a recent decision that I
Yeah.
made, very recent,
Yeah.
because I'm still having conversations within the last, I don't know, 48 hours, or
Yeah.
maybe a little more than that, but not much.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I'm happy to have the conversation, and I would say though that it should be very important, since these are our top goals, again, that we, like a committee should understand, this is important to us. It is important to us to make committees and Irvington reflect the people that live here, and that people who are people of color can see themselves in the committee and joining committees. And that is a really important goal, and therefore, it may mean that, you know, we would hope that you understand that mission and that you think it's important too.
yeah, I understand that you may come back and say, you know what, we had the conversation, no, no one agrees, and we still wanna go forward.
Yeah.
I understand that. I hope that's not the case. I hope people work out a different solution that's a compromise, but I'll accept that outcome if that's where it plays out.
Sometimes, change is not easy, and so we will have the conversation, but again, often people are afraid of change and sometimes it just has to happen, right? Like, I think it's not, you have to know, I think you have to know that if this is an important, priority of the board, that we can't, pick and choose when we think, okay, this is an important goal, and we have an opportunity to implement something that we should as a community want to go forward with it.
I agree.
But I'm tired of hearing my own voice now.
That makes two of us.
Yeah.
So, for anybody who came in late, I'm gonna recap this in under 30 seconds. You were listening,
Yeah.
okay, fine. All right, thank you, I appreciate it. All right, then we're gonna move to item 10.
No, it's not 10, you're skipping.
Sorry, item 11.
Well,
No,
hold
no,
on.
I'm not, there are other appointments within it.
Oh, that's right, okay.
So, the motion is to appoint the members, the chair and member of the Tree Preservation Committee and the ZBA, 2 members. The Rec and Parks Advisory Committee will be considered at probably a January meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Okay. Okay, report from the Facilities Planning Committee. I guess you gotta bring them up.
Hi, Arthur Chabon here, and I think I see Mike.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, you can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good evening. Just a few things just a few opening remarks here, and then would love to hear from the board on the materials that we sent. First of all, appreciate your flexibility, as Arthur and I are both out of town on business right now. We want to thank the board, the mayor for this time, and staff, all the committee members that have helped get us this far over the last several months. At our last meeting with the board, we were asked as a committee to go back and prioritize the needs assessments that were developed for various different department spaces. We were also asked to prioritize the sites into information on sites, village-owned properties, and otherwise that could be used in the future for facilities, village facilities. And we were asked to provide further guidance on how the scope of services that we had recommended could be prioritized as well. So that is, in a nutshell, what we have provided in the documents to you all. We have also been busy beginning on community engagement, posting regularly to village social media, contributing to the mayor's letter, and hosting an open house at the library on the 8th. I think, with those meetings and all the others we've had, we're probably at or above around 30 meetings for this committee so far to get us to this point. Really a great effort by all involved. And so to summarize kind of where we are at this moment in time, we have, and I think there are probably some visuals in the room that David was going to bring, but we have taken our 20 some odd candidate sites and boiled them down to 3 what we're considering preferred sites for future emergency services building, which would include fire, police, potentially IVAC, some 6 or 7 sites that could be used for DPW or some part of DPW, and a recommendation for initial services that a professional consultant would take on, which would begin with a rigorous needs assessment for the highest priority departments, which would be benchmarked, would use best practices, and be very quantitative and objective in nature, followed by testing various different sites for what the projected space needs would be for those various different departments, and also providing that the consultant would lead engagement of the community in a broad and inclusive way throughout this project, building off of what the committee's already started. So the final recommendation in the kind of one-page summary we provided is for the board to authorize staff with the support of the Facilities Planning Committee to solicit planning services. We can help in a number of ways there. We could help by introducing the village to other qualified consultants. We've begun to do that already. We could help support the drafting of the scope of services. We could help host an informational session for potential bidders on the project, and we could take part in the interviews as well, leaving open the details of how the committee would be involved into the future to be something that is coordinated with the consultant themselves, as they all have a different manner of working. But we do envision the Facilities Planning Committee to be involved at some level going forward, but we'll leave that open to the process itself, as well as how the board is engaged. But we do foresee that they would be the ones to endorse any final recommendations. So that's kind of a summary of what we've provided and where we think we are. I don't know if Arthur or if any other committee members in the room have anything to add.
No, as always, Mike, you are very thorough, so I have nothing to add to that.
Okay.
I have first,
So-
go ahead, if you wanted to say something else.
No, I'm just going to open it up to the board.
Let me ask, David, since you've got the sheets in front of you, this is just a very technical question, and then I'm going to come back to some broader questions. Is it actually possible, am I reading this correctly, that our existing firehouse is on 0.11 acres, a little over 1/10 of an acre? That doesn't seem right to me.
That's correct.
The building or the
Building.
entire lot is 0.11?
The lot that it's on.
Okay,
It's a very small lot.
okay.
4,000 square feet?
Yeah, that seems pretty small. For a-
I don't know, I have the survey in front of me.
Yeah, well,
And it's built out to the edges, pretty much.
okay,
That's it.
all right, well.
I mean, maybe some number is wrong somewhere, but.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm concerned about, because I don't want, we're going forward with the wrong number creates a lot of other issues, but,
Which is why we want a professional consultant.
okay.
That's
So-
the next step.
I mean, I
So-
will note, Mayor, that, the recommendation, if that site was to be tested, is that we believe you would need to expand from the current property to be able to accommodate a emergency service building with
Yeah, no,
or even
no
a firehouse with modern standards.
and and the building, the village owns the next building over. It's a private home
Yeah.
after that, and then it's the ambulance corps. Okay. There's a couple things that I wanted to comment on. One is you talk about examining in your cover letter shared municipal service facilities with neighboring municipalities, which I have a proposal for how to do that, but it did make me smile because it's essentially saying, let's solve the problem by making it twice as complex. Because the other village, just as many problems and just as many objections as we will. But we have periodic village officials committee meetings, and if perhaps we could, on a future agenda after discussing it, bring you folks along, and you could just talk about kind of what we're trying to do and see if there's anybody who is willing to, express some interest in pursuing that as an opportunity. That's one way to attack it. The other thing I would like to do, because the two new trustees, I don't believe have had the opportunity to meet with somebody who is a consultant in this area, is perhaps set up a meeting like we had with with the initial consultant, and it could be at a work session, as long as the person's willing to participate in that way, which would mean that then everybody gets to meet the person, just to talk about what they can do, because the way I view this, it's somewhat segmented. You've identified the priority opportunity sites and the priority facility needs, but we don't know exactly what each of those facilities requires. And we've talked about this before, which is to have the consultant define what is, the police department and the fire department are crammed into a certain space right now. What do they really need? What do regulations or recommendations require? Because that's probably going to be translated to a square footage. And if you know that square footage, you can decide whether some of these sites that we think might be suitable are not suitable, or are sites we should focus on. That seems to me, and you can certainly tell me I'm wrong, you'll just need to persuade me, but that seems to me to be the first step in this entire process, because we need to know, what do they really require?
That's right. You need to understand the building blocks, and they need to be done in a way that uses industry standards, compliance standards, other things that we can compare ourselves to in other municipalities. I imagine that we may tour some facilities together and look and hear from neighboring communities how their facilities are working, their newer ones. It's a process, and it'll be different for police than it is for fire. Police does not have as cut and dry black and white space standards as fire does. It'll be a slightly different process. You need an architect, planner who can guide you through that. And that's what we'd like to recommend and help vet.
And is that is presumably something we could do up front to then turn around and say, okay, now that we know what we really need for emergency service facilities, now take a look at these locations, tell me whether they work or they don't work. And there may be extraneous factors like flooding or other things that eliminate some of these spots. But I hadn't thought of it before, but I did see it on your list, which was, and you may tell me there's a problem with this, but the Field Point lot up top. The firehouse is on 0.11 acres, and that's 0.33 acres. That is an interesting opportunity. But I don't know how Field Point would feel about it. I don't know how,
Room for decontamination.
Yeah.
If it's three times the space, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Look at that.
Can I, if it
Of course,
I mean, one other consideration, I wouldn't mind, I know this wasn't the initial like request, but like the cost factor, I think is an important one to consider as we move forward too. Like, is it
It's in,
engineering in a certain location because there's like a river running under it versus like another location, right? Like, I think there might be some significant.
yes, that is in, if you look at the summary, point 2 of the planning support scope, site feasibility study, our construction cost estimates. We don't believe you can make a decision until you know the cost. And then you determine how you would fund it. That has to be part of decision making.
That, so I just wanted to make sure that was like a big part of the, if we did use a consultant.
I think another important point to make is that we would be looking to the consultant to help guide the process and help determine these priorities and structure how we would make these decisions.
Yeah.
What Arthur just said is the critical point. You know, we've got some good people working on this.
Sorry, David.
David Zweibel, member of the committee. Michael is also a member of the committee here. I'm not sure anybody else is. In any case, what Arthur just said, I think, is the critical point. The things that you have brought up, the things that you brought up are, you know, we've got ideas about. And, you know, Michael and Arthur are, you know, professionals. They really know what they're doing. But we need a professional to come in, do the benchmarking of what other communities have, understand exactly what we've got, understand what we possibly have to offer, what some of these sites are. At least we've done a little groundwork, you know, that these are the ones that are vaguely feasible, although the professional may come in and say, you know, you need to look some more and find something else. You know, buy the Maxon property, whatever. But the next step really is to bring somebody on who can direct the process, organize it, and do the very things that you see right away. And we've seen that too. But, you know, our task was to maybe make it a little easier for the consultant to understand the scope of what we're talking about and what we have to do.
Yeah,
I would love to, as you said before, I would love to have a chance to speak to one of these consultants and meet with them. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So just to David's point, I want to thank you guys. You have synthesized a lot of information and made it easily digestible, if you will, and helped to prioritize some things. I think I would speak for everybody here. Nobody's thrilled about spending, you know, very large amounts on a consultant, but if that advances the process and the element that I described about defining what is required for each of the departments cannot be wasted money, because we have to know what they need. No matter what happens going forward, or no matter what the timeline, it'll give us an understanding of their absolute requirements. And, you know, perhaps just to state the obvious, if we had an emergency services facility, that actually solves some of the problems in Village Hall, because you're taking the police out of this building. And we can reconfigure space in Village Hall. So, anybody, did you guys want to ask?
No, I mean, I'm assuming that what we will, I guess we will do sort of an RFP for a consultant and sort of get sort of input like on scope of services and sort of phasing of a project. So I think that's our logical next step.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, we can parallel process this, but I want to meet that consultant so that folks who have not had any opportunity, and actually, I don't think you didn't meet with the first one either. I think it might have been with Larry Lonti. So maybe we could do this one as a work session so that everybody gets the chance to understand. I know you guys can do it, Mike, you can do it a little bit because you do this professionally, but I'd rather have somebody who, you know, might be in the bidding process speak to the group about how does this work, what's their capability, and so on, because it's, you know, you're getting married here. This is a pretty serious commitment with this consultant, because we don't want to come to the same conclusion we did last time. And I understand that
Right.
part of their role will be to help us educate the community as to what's happening. And I also appreciate what you guys have done in that regard.
Yeah. I actually, I was actually just supposed to thank everyone. I attended the committee presentation for the community the other day, and I really appreciated that outreach that's been happening to the community. I think it's a huge part of it. You had a great turnout. There was a lot of engaged citizens who were asking a lot of questions. And I think you guys talked about putting it all up on the website, which it now is, which actually I was having trouble downloading it in my own email because there was an error, and I was able to do it from the website. So just for viewers at home, and I can see folks here actually, you can look it up on the website under the committees. There's a link for each of the committees, and you can go for the facilities committee and you can find it there. It's great.
I just want to pick up on the same thing you're saying, which is for those who are just learning about it here or watch this video later.
Mike, sorry, just.
Yes,
say
my
who
name
you
is
are.
Michael Hanna. I'm on the committee.
Thank you.
Just show and tell. If you Google Irvington Facilities Planning Committee, you will get a top link that takes you to our page, and there's updates on that page that has the documents that have been shared. So we have a recommendation letter that has been shared to the board, an FAQ document, and then here we also have a map that shows where the different locations that we're talking about as potential facility locations are. And then we also have a spreadsheet that talks about how that prioritization occurred. So you can find that all online at Village of Irvington Facilities Planning Committee.
Thank you. And thank you, Mike, for all your organizational work. I know that was a lot.
Could I just make one comment? We have these interesting things here. And that's, a lot of work and energy went into them. That
Wanna
said,
show them.
well, that said, there's nothing in there which is, God's law. This is a broad view. We
I'm
were,
assuming those are the two spreadsheets, correct?
yeah, the two spreadsheets.
Since we're not looking at them, we don't know what you're referring to. Thank
Would you like me
Okay.
to share my screen and pull those up? Would that be helpful?
You can, I have it on my.
My point is don't get too deep into these things.
I understand.
Because there is something wrong with every one of them. And there's some reason
Yeah.
why none of them will absolutely work, including the ones that we have, and
Yes.
that's the problem we're in.
Yeah.
So, don't get into, it's like, oh, this can never work, this is impossible, et cetera. This is just a broad view. These are possibilities, and that's why we want a consultant to come in here and figure out our needs. And maybe that's why, talking with other villages, we may discover that, well, if we just could get rid of snow plowing, maybe we have enough room to do something.
DPW.
Or something like that, who knows? But it's there, you can look at it, you can read all the information about it. And you can also email to our site that Michael has set up wonderfully, thank you. And attend the next meeting, and we'll have one, and ask specific questions if you want, but don't get too specific right now.
Understood. In a sense, a lot of that, while you did some analysis, was grouping data that came from various, village sources, and it's in a useful package, if you will. So I think maybe the takeaway is, set up the meeting with the consultant, do it as a work session, then the public can also see the interaction, the process that they go through, and then we could start to work on the what would an RFP look like? What are we asking them to do?
Yeah.
And I'll at the same time, the next time we have a village officials committee meeting, which are what is it usually, a Thursday?
Yeah, the third or fourth Thursday.
Yeah, of the month.
Not this month. but-
Yeah, understood. So we could, get you into that, just to talk in general about the process and what you do. And who knows, maybe we can even set it up online so that you don't have to actually show up. It's usually in one of the local villages. But you get everybody there as an audience, the administrator and the mayors. So, any further questions from anybody? Okay. thank you very much. I really appreciate everything that you
Thank
guys
you.
have done in holding the hearing. And we'll keep plowing forward.
Okay, well, thank you all.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay. Next item is the modification of membership for the rec, and, not quite. Next item is the Rocktoberfest, creation of and appointments to the Rocktoberfest committee. Anybody have any questions? I think we all saw the charter and the folks who are proposed for co-chairs and members. If not, I'll just make a motion. Okay. The motion is resolved that the Rocktoberfest committee is hereby established. The Rocktoberfest committee will work with the Recreation and Parks Department to plan and execute the annual Rocktoberfest community celebration. The committee is charged with presenting a budget for Rec Department approval, planning and executing Rocktoberfest in coordination with the Rec Department in accordance with the approved budget, recruiting and organizing volunteers, and identifying sponsors. The committee will define additional responsibilities and authority of its members with the Rec Department as needed. The committee's responsibilities may include, among other things, identifying and organizing bands, food and drink purveyors, sound systems, and children's entertainment for the event. Contracts and commitments for the expenditure of funds for Rocktoberfest will be approved by the village in accordance with its purchasing requirements, and further resolved to appoint the following members to the Rocktoberfest committee for a term to expire December 2025. Jared Zerman, co-chair; Francis O'Shea, co-chair; Rick Rizzulo, member; Stacy Hirsch, member. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Francis, thank you. And the, Katie, there was a memo that I wrote that captured sort of what everybody's understanding was about how we will handle the trust and agency account.
Yes,
which
I
you
have that.
Okay, fine. I mean, hopefully that never actually matters, because they'll make more money than they need. But that's useful for the rainy day, when if any that gets canceled or has low turnout. Okay. Resignation from the Housing Committee. Motion is resolved to accept with regret the resignation of Karen Schatzel as a member of the Housing Committee effective December 7, 2024. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. You know it's not gonna be me seconding that.
I know.
I don't
On
understand.
principle, he objects.
I know.
I just don't
It's just how you
understand
get
how
to that
we
point.
have
He's
to
like, I'm
vote
just not
to
doing
accept
it.
somebody,
I'm
so if
just
we
not
don't,
gonna do
they're stuck
it.
on the committee.
Exactly.
It makes no sense to me
It's the
whatsoever.
end of support it, you won't
Yeah,
say.
I mean, I voted for it, but I mean, it's like,
I understand.
I just don't get it.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me.
Okay, centralized arraignment process. So we received a letter from, a follow-up letter from Betty Gold, in particular objecting to sort of an indefinite pause. And my interpretation of the way this is phrased is, it is not an indefinite pause, it is a pause asking them to consider the following concerns that the Westchester County Police Association has put forth. And the reason this is even on our agenda is that our court system and our police force asked that we consider and adopt this so that the centralized arraignment process is not forced upon them. The other thing that's worth knowing is that we average about 10 arraignments per year, so not even one per month, over the last 4 years. So I don't know if there were any continuing questions about this or objections or whatever. The truth is, we don't have to adopt it. I just, it was a request that came from, as I said, our court system and our police chief, and I don't think it does harm. I think it simply points out here's an area that we want focused on. Larry, I asked you if other communities adopted, I think Terrytown, you said?
I believe in Yorktown are the two that I know of. There's probably one other Greenberg Village, I'm just not 100% sure. I think
Okay.
it might be Ardsley, but
Okay.
I mean, that's as much as I know right now.
All right. So,
What I wanted to highlight as a part of Mr. Gold's letter is that he wasn't necessarily saying that we need to pause, but also that part of our request should be to be at the table for the decisions that are being made for centralized arraignment process. And I don't see that as part of this resolution or this request. And I think that's an important part of it. So based on the amount of dialogue that went on and the questions that we had about arraignments, given, if we're pointing out that we only have 10 arraignments per year, then how much will it impact our cost to send them elsewhere, right? So given that there was a dialogue and questions that were continuing, I think it is important to include with this, if we're asking for a pause, to say, we'd like to know what the plan is, right? So I think one of the things I think is you can't object to a plan without knowing what the plan is.
right, which we don't, which we don't.
Right, so I wonder if there's any, way that Irvington could, or that Westchester could be included with the planning process for
So-
how centralized arraignment might take place here.
We could put it into the last whereas clause, something like
Yeah.
whereas the Irvington Police Department and the Irvington Village Justice share in these concerns, and whereas the Village of Irvington desires to participate in any implementation of a centralized arraignment process.
Well, I don't like that language.
No,
'Cause I-
the development, maybe
Discussion.
discussion and development of a
Because ultimately, we may decide we don't want to be a part of it, and I think that's what we
Yeah.
need to reserve space for.
I mean, I think also, again, just reading Ben's letter too, I think this is all, the devil is in the detail, because if the centralized arraignment system is that the police take and drop them off in White Plains, that may be 20 minutes there, and it's like, that's cheaper than if they are here and they're waiting for the justice to come and the defense lawyer to come, right? Like, and the prosecutor, I'm just saying that you don't know that, right? So
Yeah,
it
we don't know
may
whether the
be-
policeman has to sit there.
Correct, or if he has to sit there, or he
Yeah.
doesn't have to sit there, so it just, we really just don't really have much information.
But the thing that I keep going back to, I thought a lot about this, because I respected and I was really glad to read what Ben Gold had to say. I thought that was really important. But ultimately, when I distilled it down, it's like, we don't have a problem in Irvington, right? And basically, the argument is there are communities that do have a problem, and I hope that they can find a way to fix their problem, and I hope we can support ways for them to fix their problem. But if Irvington doesn't have a problem, I would hope that no outside entity, the state, the county, whoever, would come in and say, no, you have to do it this way, in a way that our police chief, our current justices, our former justice who came down to the last meeting when she heard this was going on, because she felt so passionately about it as well, that I don't think that our system that works needs to be upended because other community systems don't work. And that's what I feel strongly about here. And I feel like, that we should have a seat at the table for sure, I agree with you. But like, what I would wanna say is like, don't force this on us. We're a small village, we handle this, whether it's running them over for 20 minutes and having to stay, or running them over for 20 minutes and coming back, whether it's taking them out if someone who is from Irvington is arrested, is now being dragged out of the village, the people who have to come get them are being dragged out of the village. I think that I think it's important that we recognize that this doesn't sound like this is good for us. And I think we have our first responsibility is to the village. So I'm all for adding language that says that we get a seat at the table, but I view that as being our way of saying, don't make us stop doing something that works.
The only problem is that we may, the thing with centralized systems is that they're not probably gonna let us opt out of it.
No, I
Yeah.
understand that, but then we have to fight for that, is what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying. I'm not saying we have the power to stop it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't speak up and try to protect what's working.
So let me just recap the language, maybe put it after in the last whereas clause, the Irvington Village Police Department and Irvington Village Justice share in these concerns, and the Village of Irvington desires to participate in the discussion and development of any centralized, of a centralized arraignments process, if any.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like you've drafted things before.
But you guys did have an excellent correction when you both leaped on me for my first proposal.
Yeah. Well, based on what I said, you can see why I would be upset about that.
All right. Do I need to read this one again, or can I just make a motion to adopt what you have in front of you with that change? Okay. Then the motion is to adopt item 14 with the change that I just read. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, donation of a surplus vehicle to the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps. So we had been contacted by IVAC about getting what I think was a police car, which is, I won't say it's on its last legs because it's not, but it's not a very valuable car. It's probably about $5,000 according to a mechanic's estimate. And we would be more than happy to give it to them because they can use it for a fly car, which is a car not used for transportation, but to provide emergency medical services right on scene. So, anybody have any questions about that one?
Just a procedural one. The reason why we have to vote on this is because of the value of the car. Like, if it was $100, would we be voting on this?
It's a donation to a non-for-profit group, so regardless of
Regardless of the
need,
amount.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. I
But it
just
also
want to-
makes clear that we have no further liability.
No, I get that.
We made the point to them, it's as is where
is,
is.
yeah.
Um,
In fact, we should put on the hood as is.
Maybe on the host.
Yeah, maybe it's, no, but
I hope they're not listening.
I just wanted, no, again, I'm always interested in procedures, but it seemed like it's not a lot of money, so that's why I wanted to make sure if it was, but it's any donation has to be approved by the board?
With some value,
Yeah,
Anything that has
like
value.
over
okay,
0.
okay,
Yeah.
alright, okay, let's do it.
Okay, whereas the Village of Irvington is the owner of a surplus vehicle, specifically a 2017 Ford Explorer, which is no longer required for the operation and maintenance of the village's services, and whereas the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps provides essential emergency medical services to the residents of the Village of Irvington and surrounding communities, and whereas the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps is in need of a fly car to provide emergency medical services, and whereas the Village Board of Trustees acknowledges the continued service and critical role of the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps and desires to support their efforts by providing the surplus vehicle to further enhance their operations, and whereas General Municipal Law Section 72H authorizes the donation of surplus property, including vehicles by a municipality, to a not-for-profit organization, provided that such donation is in the best interest of the municipality and the public, and whereas the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps is a qualified not-for-profit organization under this statute, now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Village of Irvington as follows. 1, the Village of Irvington hereby approves the donation of the surplus vehicle 2017 Ford Explorer to the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps for use in their emergency medical services operations. 2, the village administrator is hereby authorized to execute any necessary documents to effectuate the donation of the surplus vehicle, including transfer of title and registration to the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps. 3, the village shall bear no further responsibility or liability regarding the vehicle once it is donated to the Irvington Volunteer Ambulance Corps. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next up is approval of an agreement with the Fiona Company, which I guess I can wholeheartedly endorse, given the size of the grants that we've gotten over the last few years. Anybody have any questions? I'm gonna wanna know why, but you're certainly welcome to ask them. Anybody?
No, she's been amazing. Is that really the name of her company? I think that's very funny.
It is.
Okay, then the motion is resolved to approve the contract with the Fiona Company for consulting services relating to grant work and authorizing the village administrator to execute said agreement. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Reports of board, standing committees and officers. Can you have anything?
Oh,
Sorry,
yes.
we usually start at the left.
Sorry.
So it shouldn't be a surprise
It's new
in the
for me,
future.
but no, I do briefly, if you want a moment. Caught me off guard. I had spoken with the buildings department, the update was there's 73 new applications, 262 inspections were done. the buildings department is working on their transitioning their new system. That they've updated all the addresses, and they're starting to update all the 2024 permits. And so they're working on merging the two systems, which is gonna require some additional like time and work and labor. And then the last thing is the Field Point parking lot is almost complete.
So I have been working on connecting with all of the GPTF and the GPTF subcommittees, and we'll have further information at our next meeting. We do have a report from the DPW, so repairing roadways based on the water main break. I think we're gonna just talk about the water main break.
That's
at our
fine.
meeting
Yeah.
From now on.
yeah.
Okay.
Was there, am I correct, there was another one on Station Road recently, Larry, do you know?
Yeah, there was. I didn't hear the
Because I
details
saw
about
a
it,
thank you from Larry.
Another one since the.
Yeah.
but, yeah.
And there was salt on the road.
Yeah.
They had to go out and fix.
Yeah.
Spiro Park, I think was the thing.
Yes.
All of the, that's okay, all of the small and large plows are ready for winter.
We have
So,
a dozen.
well, I think if you're exfoliated, you are hoping.
All right.
You are
Okay.
hoping for a
That's fair.
necessity of plows.
That's fair.
Repair of various sinkholes, et cetera, and then also they're invaluable assistance with, assisting on the water department, the water main break. And also they assisted with the holiday tree lighting. I'm in conversation with the fire department to arrange a meeting so that we can discuss what their updates might be, and I have a meeting scheduled with our water department for next week.
Thank you.
Last week I went to the theater commission meeting. It was the last meeting. Kim Gilligan was the chair. She's moved to Minnesota. She will be sorely missed. Two people have stepped up to be co-chair. I guess that goes before us. Do we have to approve them?
Yeah,
Yeah, so they have the two people that have stepped up to, and I guess that's gonna appear in January.
fine, if they give
so-
us the names.
Yeah, and am I allowed to say who? or-
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's Shauna Liebman has been on the commission for a long time and has run a lot of the great film events before the pandemic. That were really some of the best events we had. And she's awesome. And we have Jessica Arnell, a new member who's really stepped up and done a lot of volunteering. She's an actress, so she knows a lot about the community and everything. So, and they seem to have a lot of energy and stuff. I mean, Kim is gonna be absolutely missed beyond belief, but I think we're lucky that we have two really good people stepping up to take her place. So that's really good. And I hope the board will approve them whenever that comes before.
Interesting, probably the first meeting in January, if they just send us an email, or maybe you can just.
Yeah, do they know that they're supposed to do that? Maybe,
Let's
I'll
put it
reach
this
out to
way.
Greg. Yeah.
We're gonna have two appointments of co-chairs at that meeting, because I think David, you're becoming the co-chair of housing, right? With Deb Flock.
Yeah.
So.
I'll reach out to
Yeah,
Greg.
I mean, it's a
Send them
procedural
over.
thing, but yeah,
Yeah.
but they might as well do it.
I don't think anyone's gonna have a problem, they're both great. so,
Yeah.
And I also attended a library meeting today. It's always works out conveniently that it's the same day. And I saw I love the stats that they always give out, and just I wanted to note a couple things, that in November, the library had 6,232 books taken out, which is the highest number since before the pandemic, and the second highest ever since they've been taking notes of this. And this is even though it's the smallest number of days they were open because of Thanksgiving. It was only 23 days compared to others. And that 6,851 people came into the library in November. They also ran 41 programs that brought around 600 people into the library. So I just, it's kind of in so many ways, the library is like the center of our village, and we're just really lucky to have them. And the last thing is Larry and I and Leola Specht, who are we're the Irvington delegation to the Transportation Partnering Committee. That's the Route 9 thing. We attended a meeting today in Tarrytown where we got a presentation from the project manager of this project. And they presented some updates to what was shown at the public sessions at Mercy College and in Tarrytown a couple months ago. And so just everyone's gonna have to be on the lookout, because in March is gonna be the next public meeting to look at the next draft of the report, which is getting towards the last draft of the report. And as far as Irvington goes, Larry is preparing a report based on what people told us at the meetings and also what we've gotten from the public and what anyone on the board reached out to talk about as to what they had comments on about the presentation, the last presentation. And we're gonna give our notes. We know, Larry and I noted at the meeting today that we don't have any huge issues like some of the other villages do. I mean, there's like major meetings going on in Sleepy Hollow, in Dobbs Ferry, about some problematic,
Hastings, yeah, too.
oh, Hastings also, right, because at first we said no to Hastings and then we realized that they had problems too,
Got a
so.
lot going on.
So our problems are relatively small compared to theirs, but we do have some things that we want them to address and look at. So Larry will be putting that in our report. Each of the villages is making their own report to the state about that. So thank you to Larry for being the person to craft that. He had some really good ideas in addition to what came in, so, and yeah, that's where we stand.
Great.
So I don't have anything specific to report, and RPAC actually met when we had our work session, so I need to touch base with Rick, but I met with Zoe, and so just kind of getting to know all the new groups. So I'm sure I'll have more to report.
Great, thank you. Village administrator?
So just a quick thank you to our new trustees, Trustee Bloom and Trustee Kleiman, for attending our department head meeting last week. So that was a good opportunity for them to kind of see how things work internally anyway. And also, I had a very good meeting. I want to thank Zoe, who was here, along with Maureen. We had a very good meeting to kind of get organized on the USDA forestry grant that was done for the Irvington Woods. There's about $113,000 available, and we discussed there's specific categories that money's being spent in, and we started to envision what it might look like over the coming couple of years. They wanted to get an idea from us as to, you know, how much we might spend in the next 3 calendar years. So we kind of scheduled that out with a lot of the invasive removals being upfront, and then followed by plantings and other efforts that are in the grant. So you'll see more details about that, but we had a good meeting today to get organized.
Yes, I put out a news blast today, but just another reminder that the second half of the taxes are due by December 31st.
You're a very popular person at this time of the year.
Popular except for 2 times a year.
Yes. So payment can be made in person, via mail, or online. And budget prep is underway for the 25-26 budget. So budget request packets, I'm gonna send out to the department heads by the end of this month. And then the January 15th work session will be the first budget overview at a public meeting.
Thank you, village attorney. Nothing. Okay, anybody want to make public comment?
Go ahead.
I came down the road because we were talked about. I'm Angie Sullivan, and I have been fighting to get onto RPAC, which to me just feels like the strangest thing to fight, to want to volunteer, to want to be a part of the village. I have lived here for 4 years. I have 2 young kids. They are ages 5 and 8. I've said all of this before to you, John, you know this. 3 out of 4 of you also know this and see me in Matheson Park and St. Hudson and all of the other Irvington public spaces. We also use all of the rec programming. And I felt like that was the committee that I really wanted to contribute to. So I heard you, John, say that this has been so much drama. That was the word you used, drama. And it just didn't have to be like that. It didn't have to feel dramatic, right? When we started this process back in October, I was very excited to join. I interviewed with Rick Rizzullo. And the only thing that has made it dramatic is the fact that Rick gets to decide who's on the committee, and you back him up. That's the only thing that's made it dramatic. You right off the bat said he gets to decide who's on the committee so that everyone gets along. I don't know why anyone would think that I'm a person who does not get along with people. Did you notice when people were leaving after the facilities committee, how many people of all ages, right? 50 plus, all ages, all white men who came up to me to say goodbye because they saw me in the corner. Because I get along with people, right? There's nobody in this room who has an issue with me. I just met a friend over there. Her name is Heather. Nobody. So what is it that made you feel like you had to say that part of the reason why you intervened was to make sure that people got along? Because that's not what this is about. This is about sitting down with community members who want to make good decisions for our community, right? We've invested a lot being here. We spend a lot of time, like I said, using all of the RPAC services. This isn't about getting along. This is about the fact that I have been an educator for 2 decades. I have managed multi-million-dollar budgets to create excellent programming for children all over the Northeast. Never came up, by the way, in the interview. Nor did it come up whether or not I would be able to get along with people. So I just want you to consider why there has been so much drama around this and stop it. Because you have the power to, and so do the other people on the board.
Correct.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. To some extent, what you just said, Angie, kind of proves my point. I don't like, perhaps it comes with the territory of being mayor, but I was put in the position of having everybody do what you just did in separate phone calls, including some of the folks on this board. And it occurred to me that the best thing I could do for all of you is put you in one room and make you talk to each other like the intelligent adults you all are. Intelligent, mature, my turn, then you may come back to the mic.
Don't talk to me like I'm a child. Don't me. I am not a child. Please do not talk to me like I'm a child.
You are interrupting me.
I did not interrupt you. I put my hands up. So
Okay.
if you want me to speak, I will speak. If you don't want me to speak, I don't need to. I was not interrupting you. I was putting my hands up.
Okay, fine, put your hand up. My point is that it is my prerogative not to be in the firing line between multiple groups, multiple committees that really need to get in one room and have, yes, a mature conversation, one where they try to understand each other. I fully understand the points that were made by Trustee Burgos before about how we need to create much greater diversity that reflects the race, creed, color, and religion of this village, not to mention sexual preference in many of these, in fact, all of these committees. I get that. But I shouldn't have to take the abuse that I have taken just to try to get people to agree. So those folks can get in one room and try to do that. If you fail, then it's my prerogative to try to work out the solution with this group. If you were listening, and I'm sure you were before, you heard me say that if you can't get together and come up with what could be a reasonable solution by treating each other like neighbors, because that is what we're all claiming here, we're all part of the same community, then I'll have to bring back up what's on the agenda now. I don't think waiting 1 month is gonna break anybody's spirit.
No, I can wait, and I very much look forward to that conversation.
And by the way, you may be the best qualified person to go on that committee, but how do you know that the other people aren't
I
equally
never said
qualified?
that they weren't. I would love us all to be on the committee.
Well, that's
I'm
why-
not trying to exclude anybody
Yeah.
from the community.
But that's
what
why
I'm
it's
trying to
worth-
say.
that's-
We could all be on the committee. I'm happy to have the conversation.
Right.
And the point has gotten to the point where it's like, what do we expect is gonna happen? What do we expect is gonna happen?
Maybe nothing, but I was really hoping people would act, and I'm gonna use the word again, like adults and have a mature conversation and understand each other. You can be insulted by that, but what I've had to put up with tells me not everybody's acting like an adult and not everybody's showing a
not acting like
level of
an adult.
maturity.
We don't
I
have
don't
to
wanna
do your
speak to
calling
that.
a child.
I just wanna give, I didn't call you a child, I
I
said not
said-
everybody.
Okay, can I think that we already have beat this point to death, but we can have a sort of, I think, offline conversation, maybe it could have been handled differently after our last conversation. Because I do think, I do think it is important that we move forward. I think it's important that we move forward, and happy to have the conversation, facilitate the conversation. And, you know, I think it is better for the village to have more representation, so we can have the conversation, reconvene, and, you know, I have no doubt that everyone can be, you know, can have a conversation, taking also into account what the board wants, right? I feel that what the conversation that we had, we were pretty in sync, unless anyone has changed their mind since the last conversation we had. But I felt
No,
like we were pretty in sync.
I wholeheartedly
Yeah.
agree with that.
Yeah.
But I didn't wanna do what we agreed to without giving everybody the chance to hear each other's voices. That's inclusivity.
Yes, but you could have just, I hear you, but you could have just said to us today, for example, because actually before, when we had the conversation, when the DEI committee sent the letter, they were supposed to come to this meeting, right? And if we were gonna have that conversation, then we sort of I thought we had resolved it. And then, in fact, the committee is on the, like they are on the phone, right? They were on the Zoom, but we could have done it differently. We could have had the conversation. They could have come and we could have talked about why it was important, or they could have made the presentation if that was necessary. Based on the last conversation we had, I thought we were not there. So maybe people talked to you after and that changed your mind, but it would have been good for you to communicate that to us, because that changed from where we were, where we last left the conversation, so that's what
fair.
was confusing.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes, I surprised everybody.
Yeah, it was confusing, and I
I
feel
get
like, just so you know too, like, right, for Josie and I, who are communicating too with the committee, it's kind of difficult, because then it is confusing.
I just want to say this is the only place in my life where I've ever been talked down to in the way that I get talked down to whenever I speak to you. And I sat down and I said thank you, and all you needed to do, I'm going to tell you the same thing that I tell the leaders that I work with. And all you need to do is say, thank you, I hear your perspective. I mean, you don't need to sit there and basically say very condescending things to me that make me feel like I'm a child and other people. So that's all I'm saying. I'm just giving you that feedback. When I go sit
I
down,
appreciate that, but that means you didn't hear what I said, because I said some people have, I never said
okay,
you.
just all you have to say is thank you. I hear your perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is why people don't wanna participate. Unbelievable.
Okay, so, public,
You have one online.
okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Sang Hee. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Sang Hee Wan, and I am also, like Inji, one of the people that have been fighting to get on RPAC. And I just wanted to express that, like many others, I'm quite disappointed at what has transpired tonight. And I also want to agree with Trustee Kent in saying that this conversation, I think, clearly highlights the need for clarity and standardization of the interview process for all of the village committees. I am a member of the DEI committee, and I think our committee has been very clear for a while now about the need for diversity in community engagement on all aspects of the community, and including transparency in the selection process for village committees. I am involved. I am one of the people trying to get on the committee, and I am confused by the process for which I have been an active participant. So I'm not sure how anyone in the public can possibly follow this process, if you can even call it that, let alone want to participate, especially as a person of color. I think this conversation clearly shows there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this aspect, including increasing education and political will to support DEI issues, especially among our elected officials. I think a lot of the confusion has been actually sown just by just changes in process. I don't even know if you can call it that, but changes as this conversation is happening, and changes, quite frankly, to what you have said, John, about this. So I think, I again look forward to meeting with RPAC and encourage the mayor to reflect on your decision tonight, and also the words that you've used tonight in terms of explaining this. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Not online, no.
Michael Hanna. When I learned today that Karen Schatzel is leaving the Housing Committee, I wanted to stay and share a few, unfortunately, very brief words. I wish I had more to share about an incredible person, someone who's kind, present, thoughtful, impactful, a decades-long community volunteer on the Housing Committee, on the League of Women Voters of Westchester. I'm sure many, many other ways she's contributed to our community. Like I said, I wish I had more to share, but I do want to encourage you, if you meet Karen Schatzel, to talk to her. You have a lot to learn.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, sorry.
David Twyla back again. Just quickly on the centralized arraignment issue, I just want to say that not everybody is really paying much attention to this, but I really appreciate Mitch's comments and can't agree with him more that we really should want to fight to keep our arraignments in our village. There's only 10 a year. It's not costing us that money. I think it's a DEI issue as well. These people are arrested in our community and getting trucked off to White Plains or whatever can be traumatic, etc. We're not arresting people that are shooting people left and right here. So let's do everything we can, as Mitch has suggested, to keep it in the village. And maybe we should check with other villages that are like us, that don't have a problem, so that we're more than just one voice in the wilderness asking for that. Thank you.
Also have one more online.
Okay.
Hi there, Jorge Magallon, Irvington resident. I want to start off by saying thank you for letting me talk, and second of all, by asking a question. Was the DEI letter that was sent to the board read into the public record?
No.
No, okay. So then I want to give just a little bit of quick background and,
Sorry.
yeah.
My recollection was they asked that it not be made part of
Because
the
we
public
resolved it, because
Right.
we thought we had resolved it.
Right.
I see. Okay,
And that,
that's fine. If
Yeah,
you're
that's
welcome
fine.
to
After we
read whatever
change
you
that.
like, but we can put it into the public record if that becomes something.
I think that would be a great idea because the letter is much more eloquent than I'm going to be.
That's fine. We'll
But-
put it at the next meeting, which may be when we address the issue. So, go ahead.
And it actually goes to my point. The reason that it's not being read in its record is because apparently we thought we had resolved the issue. I think originally, the DEI committee had made itself available per your request to be here today because we thought it was a fait accompli that our 2 members plus 2 more people were going to become members, right? And so I think a lot of the frustration maybe that's been aired out here and a lot of the surprise.
Forgive me for saying
Yes.
this. I apologize.
Yes.
And I emphasize this to the folks who happen to be on DEI but want to be on RPAC.
Mm-hmm.
They're not DEI members. They represent themselves. They bring diversity to the committee, but they are not representatives of DEI. I know that's a
Right.
subtle, subtle point.
it's a semantic
but it's
thing.
I think it's an
Yeah, I got
important
it.
point.
Okay, that's fine.
They are there representing
Sure.
themselves and the community.
Sure.
And yes, they are people of color.
They're very well-rounded individuals in
And I
many
will
different-
not interrupt you again, I'm sorry.
But I guess my point was then, so the reason I'm saying this is because from our perspective, it seemed like it was already a fait accompli that they, along with the 2 other people, were going to be members, right? So that's the reason there are 16 people here from DEI, or however many of us there are. Actually, there's like 8 of us. So I think I share the surprise that some of the board members had here too, that it was surprising that wasn't just going to be, they weren't just going to be nominated or whatever, put onto the boards today. And second of all, I think it kind of goes to, there's also a little bit of frustration because I think at the meeting that you, Mayor, attended, I think you said that our letter says it again more eloquent than I'm going to say it, is that you kind of led us to believe that I think you said that air we breathe in Irvington should be DEI. And then today, there was talk about it being DEI being shoved down the throats of people. And I think it's a mischaracterization. I think that,
I think that, the latter part I did not say.
okay, yeah, maybe. So I think I just want to shed a little light on the frustration of people here today, because I think it wasn't that we wanted to complain or be bitter or anything like that. We're very surprised, and this started in October, and now we're talking about this, January and December. And it doesn't seem so complicated from our perspective. I'm not exactly sure why our pack is limited to 9 people, but it seems like to overcomplicate a relatively simple issue. And that's really part of I think the frustration. But thank you again for letting us talk.
Toko.
Yep, okay.
I very much appreciate your comments. I think they're dead on.
Yep.
The reason I did this, and I apologize to my fellow board members and to anybody else who was surprised, TEI as well, is I was getting buffeted back and forth by folks on both sides of this issue, and I felt it was not appropriate to, in a sense, force this outcome. Not that I won't do it in January, but I want people to talk. And I don't think that's a sin, to be honest with you.
No, not at all.
And in fact, since part of DEI ought to be education, having a conversation with people, you might find that folks on the other side are not that different and not disagreeing with where you're coming from, but have practical issues. And I would like that conversation to occur. I should have said it beforehand. I should have chased everybody down, 5 days ago if I could have done it, but I didn't. My mistake. I'll take responsibility for that. But I still think it's the right thing to ask people to talk. They may come back to me and say, we totally disagree, we can't come up with any kind of solution that would work, and then we'll put it back on the agenda. I understand that may be disappointing, and I understand it has taken a considerable amount of time. By the way, it's not that unusual to have an extended period of time play out when you have this large a number of people, just through the sheer process of getting their background. We keep it as a process, by the way, can't we keep it open for 60 days to let people submit their requests? So there's 60 days to start with for this process.
Sure. So I don't disagree with a lot of what you said in principle. I'm gonna say, I think it's overcomplicating it. I think both Inji and Sanghi are incredibly intelligent people, and they would be able to work with anyone. And I don't think committees, and I don't think committees and I don't think committees necessarily have to be collaborative. Sometimes I think it's good that iron meets iron. Professionally, heated arguments are okay. I've had plenty of heated arguments in really successful committees. That's fine.
What are you gonna say with me?
So did I.
Yeah, but those have never been successful on my part. So I do think, again, I beg to differ in that I think it's okay. It's overcomplicating the issue to limit our PAC and to limit us and to push it down, kick the can down the road, as my wife likes to say. It's okay to put people in and let them scrap it out. I think that we're all intelligent people. It's okay for people to disagree. It's fine.
I got it.
Sounds good.
And the good news is, the first meeting is like in the first week of, I think it's first week of January.
Sounds good. See you then.
So we're talking 2 weeks or
right.
whatever, something like that.
Thanks again for letting me talk.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, anybody else?
I have one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Natalie Schrader. I am also a member of the DEI committee. And I have just 2 things to say. I too am always in favor of conversation and collaboration, but I just want to recognize what a strong message it would have sent had you taken a stance there and prioritized DEI here by sort of pushing forward and ensuring that there was open membership for those who want to join. And so I'm not disagreeing, and 2 weeks is not a huge difference. And I trust that our committee members can engage in good conversation with our PAC members, but I'm just waiting for someone in this village with power to take a strong stance on issues of DEI, because I think that that would really go a long way. I also, just as someone who's been listening tonight, I just feel sad by the way the conversation went with Ingy. And it doesn't feel, talking about collaboration and conversation, it left me feeling incredibly sad and uncomfortable. So I am hopeful that someone will take a strong stance. And I think this could have been prevented. It's disappointing it wasn't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, session with council? Okay,
We'll just end the meeting.
all right, meeting's adjourned. Actually, motion to adjourn.